Well, good evening, Chiefs Kingdom. I am Keys, the K in Back Talk Bros, and the B in the A. That's Brian Gooch, and Aaron Morrow should be with us here shortly. But on this next episode of Back Talk, we are going to review the Chiefs' loss to the Eagles. We're going to preview the Chiefs' game against the Las Vegas Raiders. We're going to answer questions in chat and more. So, with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and hit that intro music.
Y'all ready for them Chiefs? Y'all ready for them Chiefs?
All right. Well, again, as I said, we're going to talk about Monday night's game, and we're going to preview the Raiders game when Aaron and Gooch get with us here. Usually, while I'm waiting on them, I'll do a by the numbers, but I'm going to be honest with you. I had planned to get all my stuff together to show, but then last second, I caught Chief Concerns, great channel. You guys should check it out with former Chiefs great tight end not Tony Gonzalez, Jason Dunn. Jason played alongside Tony Gonzalez, among others, during his time in Kansas City. But they had on Larry Kirksey, who is a former NFL wide receiver coach. And so, this one's kind of interesting because until I caught that episode of Chief Concerns, I was kind of being influenced to calm my butt down by Seth Kaiser and Nate Taylor and on their newest episode that they did for KCSN. And so I was thinking, well, maybe I have been unfair to Connor Embry. Maybe I just need to chill out a little bit on all of this. And I got to say, and I'm not going to say maybe I don't need to chill out a little bit on this. Maybe I still do, but I got to say, having caught what I caught of this episode of Chief Concerns, I'm not really going to go there. Larry Kirksey, if you're not familiar with him, he was a wide receiver coach for multiple teams. He was coached various positions for multiple teams. He coached the San Francisco 49ers, I want to say from 1994 through 1999. So he coached Jerry Rice. He coached Terrell Owens. I believe he coached Andre Johnson. And I think maybe even DeAndre Hopkins, maybe not DeAndre, but so he's got some good names under his belt as a coach, and knows a thing or two about wide receivers. And I was going to record this clip and show it, but you guys should just go check out the whole episode of Chief Concerns with Larry Kirksey on there. Great episode. They might still be going right now, but I had to end to jump on here. But one of the things that Larry said in regards to wide receiver coaches is he said something to the effect of, if as a wide receiver coach, you see something on film and you keep seeing it on film week after week, at some point it's your fault, basically. And Seth Kaiser and Nate Taylor, great guys. I love Seth. I really enjoy Nate's reporting. Nate is coming out with an article for The Athletic. And he read a couple paragraphs on the show, like a preview of it, basically talking about how the Chiefs wide receivers start start each practice doing this ball drill to help them focus on contact and catching through contact. And so I was like, okay, I understand what you're saying. Yes, there is a point where players have to be the ones who are held responsible. And I'm not going to be the last person by any means uh, to not hold a player responsible. I think, however, when you see a whole wide receiver room suffering from the same issues, that it goes from a individual player responsibility thing to very, very clearly to those of us with a freaking brain that it's a coaching issue. It could be Andy Reid, it could be Connor Embry, it could be a number of things, but at some point, when it's a whole freaking group, it's not the group. It's the leader of the group. It's the person who puts the players in the drills. It's the persons who are supposed to be responsible for breaking down the film and using drills to make those players better. Should it also be on those players to individually do it? Absolutely. But at some point, the person who is coaching and leading the group as a whole has to take some freaking responsibility for it. And overall, a huge chunk of that responsibility has to land on the shoulders of Andy Reid as the leader of the team and the leader of the offense itself. And so I'm going to stop myself here before I get a little too animated on this, but it's really frustrating seeing what we saw from the Chiefs receivers coming out of a bye with more than a week and a half to really work on things, to hone things in. And so Nate's basically saying, hey, listen, they do this specific drill every practice. So it's not Connor Embry's fault, it's the receiver's fault. Well, how about this one, Nate? Maybe the drill is not doing what they want it to accomplish. At some point, if you are running a drill and your players are still having the issue that that drill is supposed to get rid of, maybe the problem is your drill is not working. My wife is in education. I have done enough myself in education, and I'm a homeschooling parent to know that if something isn't working, it's on you as the teacher to figure out what you need to do to get the results that you want. So if a drill isn't working, which clearly this drill hasn't been working, and if it's the drill that the Chiefs have been using for a handful of years, this clearly hasn't been working because we've been talking about wide receiver drops all the way back when Tyreek was here 2 or 3 years ago. We were talking about drop. Oh, when we were really talking about drops? All the way back in Super Bowl 54. No, Super Bowl 55, sorry. Super Bowl 55, when Patrick Mahomes was running for his life on every play and he was hitting receivers in their hands and their helmets. So, all the way back to Super Bowl 55, we have had a wide receiver drop problem. So, that precedes Connor Embry. It has nothing to do with Eric Bieniemy or Matt Nagy. The common denominators are Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce. Those three players are the only ones who were on that offense who are on this offense. So it's not on Patrick Mahomes for receivers to catch the ball if he's hitting them in the hands and in the helmet. Travis Kelce is only one person. So I think at some point we have to start giving Andy more heat and stop putting Andy in a protective bubble of admiration and divine like worship, because something is broken here. Andy picked the wide receiver coach. Andy picked the receivers. I'm not going to trash Brett Veach for that because I don't think there's one personnel move that Andy Reid doesn't triple stamp. Brett Veach is going out and getting the type of receiver that Andy wants. He's saying, how about this guy? Andy's saying, yes, that's the guy I want. That's the type I want. Another thing that Seth Kaiser, Nate Taylor on their show, I don't remember which one of them was talking about it, but one of the three, it could have been JJ Briscoe, one of the three basically said receivers are who they are when they come out of college. Like there's very little growth out of a wide receiver in general. Most wide receivers will have minimal growth in the NFL. Now, as a person who does not believe that I'm not someone who has a fixed mindset. I believe everybody can grow. I believe in every moment and every opportunity in life, whether it's work, whether it's relationships, whatever it is, everybody always has a choice in every moment to learn or to stay stagnant or to go sideways, which is basically the same thing as stagnant. So I refuse to buy that any wide receiver who comes into the NFL has to stay the way they are when they get to the NFL because we've seen it. Maybe it's unfair for us to judge every wide receiver because of Tyreek Hill's work ethic and his ability to turn himself from a running back into a legitimate NFL wide receiver who's now one of the top 3, 4, 5 receivers in the NFL. Maybe that's not fair. But it's also ridiculous to see MVS take a step backwards, to not see a step forward from Sky Moore, to basically have never seen any growth from Mecole Hardman his whole time in the NFL. I mean, throw them all out there, guys. Like, this is a big issue, and everybody is assuming. Yes, that's true. We're all making assumptions. Nobody really knows the full picture. I get it. There's a lot of factors probably going on here. I'm comparing two different stories that I just saw. One by Nate Taylor and Seth Kaiser, for those joining in, who put out a video for KCSN basically saying nothing is, well, it's quite likely that nothing is the wide receiver coach's fault. I also just watched Jason Dunn, former Chiefs tight end, have former NFL wide receiver coach Larry Kirksey, who coached Jerry Rice and Terrell Owens and Andre Johnson, among other NFL receivers, come on and say, if you're looking at the tape and breaking it down every week and you see the same thing, at some point that's a coaching issue. Because as a coach, if you see that same thing, you got to coach it. You're the one who has to get it fixed. And it's not one receiver. So, Liz, glad that you're with us this evening. Glad you're with us too. Kansas City Area Youth Jazz Inc. Make sure you guys check out their channel. It's Chris, right? Do you think the offense can turn it around, contend to defend as Super Bowl champs? You know, this is really where I dropped the ball. Like I said, I was planning on taking the time to look for, there were certain graphics that I know are out there that talk about our third down proficiency, you know, all these different metrics that show that the offense is still churning it out pretty good, right? We had 2 turnovers in the red zone in this game. We had 2 turnovers. Patrick Mahomes threw an interception. That was in the second half of the game, right? Patrick threw an interception into the red zone that was picked off by Kevin Byard. And then Travis fumbled at like the 10-yard line. The offense has had games that's basically the epitome of. The offense has still driven on, you know, a number of drives. They have just either had an untimely penalty, an untimely turnover, or an untimely drop. It's usually one of those 3 things. We've been driving the ball down the field fairly well. This offense is still right there, top 5, top 10 in a lot of numbers, but it's come down to those three things: untimely penalties, untimely drops, and untimely turnovers, whether interceptions or fumbles. And I would assume, without looking it up, we're getting close to Patrick Mahomes' career high for interceptions in a season. I'm going to look it up really quick here. Hopefully I can keep talking while I do so, but I want to say, yeah, his career high is 13. He's had 12 twice, last year and 2018, his first year as a starter. He also had 50 touchdowns when he had 12, and he had 41 touchdowns last year. Uh, 2021, he had 37 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. So that was uh, his worst without a doubt. QB rating year, his worst touchdown to interception ratio year. Um, Completion percentage tied for his second worst of his career. So far this year, he's tying his career best completion percentage. But he already has 9 interceptions, 19 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. So he's basically at a 2-to-1 ratio. At the last couple of years, he's been around three-ish, a little over 3 touchdowns to interceptions. 2000, 2018, he was almost 5-to-1 touchdowns to interceptions. 2019, he was right there again. He was a little over 5-to-1 touchdowns to interceptions. 2020, again, I'm doing this math quickly in my head. Looks like it was even closer. It was over 6-to-1 touchdowns to interceptions in 2020. And, again, closer to 3-to-1, a little under 3-to-1 in 21, and around 3.5-to-1 touchdowns to interception ratios in 2022. This year, we're just a tad over 2-to-1 touchdowns to interceptions. He's 4 interceptions away from tying his career high. And even in that season, he's still another 18 touchdowns away from his touchdown mark that season. And I closed the window, but the fumbles are there, the fumbles from other players, especially Travis drops. I think I saw Travis has 6 drops this season. And so it's like the offense has been able to still function at times, and even with all the dysfunction, right? Even with the receivers not being able to get open, not running routes correctly, not running crisp routes, not catching the ball. Even with all these things, the offense has still been good enough to an extent. I think with uh, the way that the running game looked in the Chiefs and Eagles game, I liked some of the things the Chiefs were doing in the first half, and I haven't watched the film to see if I was right that they stopped doing it in the second half. But in the first half, one of the things that I noticed was they would be in 12 personnel a lot, and they would have Travis and Noah right next to each other and go in motion so they could read the defense and then come back once they knew whether the defense was in man or zone. Well, I noticed that a lot in the first half of the game, and in the second half I didn't notice it at all. I don't want to say they stopped doing it at halftime, but to my eye, I just wasn't noticing if they were still doing it after halftime, and I would kind of question why, if they did stop it, why they did, because clearly things were working in that first half. Aaron says he's indisposed at the moment. He's probably sitting on the Gooch throne. Aaron, we're glad you're with us. Aaron answers, Aaron says, absolutely they can. Yeah, very likely we had 2 touchdowns that the interception and Travis's fumble stole away from us, right? Yeah, only lost by 4 points. You know, I was it was a 14-point difference from the Super Bowl by our defense, right? It was a 14-point difference by our defense um, between the Super Bowl and Monday night, and that was with no Nick Bolton, which I would expect when Nick Bolton comes back, it's only going to make this defense harder. Um, and it will be interesting if Aaron and Gooch were here, and of course Aaron's in the chat. Gooch was on an airplane, but and everyone in the chat can answer this too. Uh, is it a good thing or a bad thing that on that long pass to was it Devontae Smith? Is either Brown or Smith? I think it was Smith. The long pass that he went down at like the 1 yard line. Do you guys think it's a good thing or a bad thing that Chris Jones wasn't on the field for that? Like, I kind of go back and forth on it. Like, maybe we would have gotten better pressure with Chris Jones out there, which could be the positive side of it. But the negative side of it is why the hell wasn't Chris Jones on the field for that play? What's going on that Chris Jones isn't out there for that play? So I'm interested in what you guys have to say about that. Um, And I'm going to go back here because I'm not sure that I fully answered the question here. There's that one aspect, right? There's a lot that you can be positive on. There's still a lot in the wide receiver area as a whole that needs to get cleaned up on. And even the offensive tackle stuff isn't where I'd like to see it. It's not that the each of those rooms can continue to improve just because we already had our bye and we're halfway through the season. They absolutely can. It's just that we are used to so many different things. And um maybe we are spoiled. Maybe we are. Maybe we take too much for granted. But adjustments after the buy and seeing improvement on things is one of those things we're used to seeing. And I don't know that we saw any kind of adjustments or improvements on the offense. Like, and so it's kind of frustrating. Um, and everyone knows, like how bad the offense has been not scoring in the second half of games. But, again, you're so close there. You're at what? The 10-yard line, 15-yard line on two separate plays where we're about ready to score, and you got to figure at least 6 points at the worst. Pat, was just a little bit off on that throw. He had an easy 6 there. So it's kind of like a good news, bad news thing. The good news is like it's still the good news is for as bad as much as there is that needs to get cleaned up and for as bad as it looks, the good news is it's still coming down to, a few plays where we're shooting ourselves in the foot. The drops, the interceptions, the fumbles, the untimely offensive penalties. So I think that about the only way the wide receiver stuff gets cleaned up is if we have a similar moment to last year. Was it last year? Guys, was it last year, right? When Juan Thornhill wasn't playing and Sorensen kept getting beat. And Sorensen kept getting beat. Thornhill wasn't playing. And the media started asking every freaking week. The defense and Spags were getting angry, and Andy was getting angry every freaking week. And they tried to make it to the bye, but they had to make their changes a couple weeks before the bye because of how big of an issue it was becoming and how much the media wasn't letting it go. This kind of feels like that. This kind of feels like they're going to have to, especially, the bad thing is right after a bye, and we're still seeing the same issues. And again, I was prepared to be like, okay, maybe Nate Taylor's right. maybe I'm being too negative for Connor Embry. By the way, it's not that I'm necessarily being negative on him. I put this on Andy. Andy Reid should never put this kid in the position he's in, whether as scapegoat, to fail as a wide receiver coach, whatever evaluation we want to make of Connor Embry, it's on Andy Reid for putting him in that position, which is one of the reasons I'm more angry. I'm angry on behalf of Connor Embry. I'm, angry as a Chiefs fan, but also you have these young receivers who need legitimate coaching. And so you put it all together, you know, I mean, as I said, like just go watch Chief Concerns. Um, they just had on former NFL wide receiver coach Larry Kirksey. Um, and he hit on some of these things, right? He hit on a number of these things. Um, and I'll just leave it at that. I'm going to move on from the whole wide receiver stuff, the wide receiver coaching, unless Aaron and Gooch jump on and pull me back in. Um, and I'll just leave it at that. Oh, sorry. I kind of jumped ahead here. Do you think that the extra long seasons every year are perhaps taking a toll? Uh, you know, are we talking about players or coaches? Maybe Travis's health, if we're talking about players. Um, the wide receiver room is so young that I don't think we could really credit that for the wide receiver room, right? Because we've had um, Justin Watson, Justin Ross, and Sky Moore and MVS have only been on the team since last year, since 2022. So it wouldn't really affect them anyway. Rasheed Rice, uh, Richie James have only been on the team this year. I forgot Kadarius Toney, who's only been on the team for half a year last year. So it's not like outside of some McCole Hardman would be the only one, right? And he just came back to Kansas City, but he would be the only one if we're talking about players in the wide receiver room who would be affected by that. All the other guys have only been here last year or this year, so um, yeah, I mean the interior offensive line, you could say that, but I would say this: why would it only occur for the offense, right? Because it hasn't affected the defense that we know of. Hasn't looked like it's affected L'Jarius Sneed. Um, Chris Jones, maybe it's not. It wasn't the holdout that he's not looking quite as sharp. Maybe it's that. Maybe you want to blame that for Nick Bolton's injury. I don't know. I would say probably more if we're going to go there. I'd say probably more the coaches because those are the guys who are already putting in like 3, 4, 5 hour nights of sleep and getting right back at it. But at some point, I think the whole sleep deprivation thing as a coach is honestly way more harmful. And look at that, my beautiful face twice. Gooch.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, Scott. Good to see you as well. So where did the plane land this time, Gooch?
Oh, back in Kansas City, Missouri. Missouri.
Oh, sorry, guys. I just saw your guys' text thread there. So turns out, no. I know you had to miss it, Gooch, but go back and watch that Chief Concern episode. There were some good stories in there, but I was telling everyone, one of the things that Larry Kirksey said was, if as a wide receiver coach, you're watching the film and you see the same issues pop up week after week, it's on you as the wide receiver coach to fix those issues. Oh, we are all back now.
Hello, hello.
No snap. We're all here. That's what's cracking.
How's it going, brothers?
Hey, what's up, bro?
I've just been going on a diatribe about the whole wide receiver stuff, but
That that is the worst thing to talk about. That's been going on for sure. Defense played great.
yeah, I was impressed for the defense. In fact, not that you guys had to watch, but I was on Dan Talks Football last night, and we're doing NFL team tiers, which Gooch still
Caught the very end.
waiting on your show, Gooch, for yours, but
Sorry,
so,
it will be ready tonight. I just had an emergency the last 36 hours.
things got crazy.
Yeah, I've heard about it.
But
hey, Robert.
I'm going to throw this up because I had, coming into Monday Night Football, I had the Eagles at 1 and the Chiefs at 2. And I knocked the Eagles all the way back to 6 in my rankings yesterday. And Dan and One Pride, who's a Lions fan, the three of us were on the show, and they asked me why I moved the Eagles from 1 to 6 after the Eagles won the game. And, part of that was because the Chiefs utterly dominated that game. And I'm not the only one who believed that. I heard Kirk Warner go on and talk about how the Chiefs dominated that game, and they clearly looked like the better team through most of the game. As you guys can see, the numbers there outside of the score, the Chiefs won in essentially every single category. They had about 100 yards of offense more than the Eagles. They had 44 passing yards more than the Eagles. And that's with Travis being doubled and tripled and not having guys like Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown to throw the ball to as well. 114 rushing yards to 168 for the Chiefs, which I know Gooch is going to be happy with that number of rushing yards, with Andy finally listening and running the ball more.
That gum right.
Even the yards per play, the Chiefs had 7 more first downs. Third downs, the Chiefs defense held Philly to 3-11, and they never had a fourth down that they went for. They did do the brotherly shove on a second down, though, interestingly enough. Maybe that was to give some kind of respect to the Chiefs' defense, or maybe they just didn't want to have to run a regular play there. But the Chiefs were actually 8 of 17 on third down and 2 of 3 on fourth down. And the Chiefs ran 20 more plays in this game than the Eagles' offense did. Chiefs defense got 5 sacks. The Chiefs offense only gave up 1. 7 punts to 6. The penalties both had 7. There's only a 6-yard difference there in penalties. But the Chiefs lost a fumble that the Eagles didn't, and both teams had an interception thrown, and the Chiefs had time of possession by over 4 minutes. So everything but the score, and again, you had a very close interception in the end zone that Patrick Mahomes would like to have back, and you had a Travis Kelce fumble on a punch out at around the 10-yard line on a separate drive that wiped away 14 points right there. And this was without, for all that we're complaining about our wide receivers, this is 14 points right there. And you're looking at 31-21 at best, maybe, if you're an Eagles fan. most optimistically. So for me, I came into this game, I had the Eagles at 1, but I came away completely and utterly unimpressed with them. So I knocked them down to number 6, and I elevated the Ravens and the 49ers.
I would think it says more about our defense than their offense, but there was also an MVS drop that was a touchdown.
That as well. So if you want to add 21 points, Aaron, that would be what? 30, 38? 38 to 21? Like, that's a beating.
Yeah.
And that's with us not having a great wide receiver room that we're constantly complaining about. You know, and the offense just looking like so deficient. But, you know, it goes back to
what talking about the veterans.
Yeah. You know, it goes back to what I was saying to Chris there with Kansas City Area Youth Jazz Inc. You know, it's like, you know, for as dysfunctional as the offense has looked, and we keep talking about they've scored, what, 1 touchdown in the fourth quarter this year, I think.
Is that true?
I think it's true. I might have just made it up.
Good Lord.
Or maybe that's only in their losses, but
that would be awful.
In the second half of the games, the offense hasn't been scoring, but take a look back in this game. I believe all 3 of those plays were in the second half. Maybe I'm wrong on the Mahomes interception. Do you guys remember, was that first half or second half? I could look it up.
Jeez.
But we know the MVS drop was second half, and we know the Travis fumble was second half, right? I even want to say both were the fourth quarter.
No, the interception was first half because that's when like the first 3 drives for each team mirrored each other. It was punt, touchdown, touchdown, interception, interception. Like they were just basically, it was like watching the same team go up and down the field because the end result was the same.
Oh, and by the way, we also had, what, a 4th and 3 or 4th and 4 at the 39-yard line that we punted. That was in the fourth quarter, if I recall correctly, fairly late in the fourth quarter. And I understand the field's wet.
No, I understand why he did it, because I probably would have done it too. Your defense is playing excellent up until that point. The problem is that they didn't really start showing that they were gassed until right about then. I would have punted thinking my defense was going to give me the ball back too. Like I legit would have done it.
But, I mean, here's the thing, Gooch. Unless, and we all love Tommy, but he's not a coffin corner punter. So you're at the 39-yard line, and you're probably figuring on a touchback that's going to net you 19 yards. If you believe in your defense enough to punt them the ball back, you can believe in your defense enough to go for it. Like, you can't, in each of these games, the offense isn't to the point where we can be giving away possessions, but we do. We give away possessions because of penalties. We give away possessions because of fumbles and interceptions. And at the 39-yard line, I think you have to trust the best kicker in the NFL, which he absolutely is this year. He's absolutely been the best. I think you have to trust him, or you have to trust the offense, because you have that great freaking defense. You should be able to trust special teams or the offense in that situation and trust your defense to have their back there rather than punting the ball and giving away a valuable possession with as much as the offense has been struggling. Go ahead, guys. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Firstly, because there's not a single coach in the league in 35-degree weather and a downpouring of rain is going to put their kicker out there for a 60-yarder. Not a single one.
56.
If it was at the 39, you've got 10, which is 40. Okay, even still, 56. No coach is going to do that in those conditions. Because, I mean, just not. You know what I'm saying? You're setting your team up for failure. And then Mahomes is off, the receivers are off. Everybody's complaining about the receivers. Nobody's landing at Mahomes' feet because Mahomes is a god. But he's been off too. But then you want them to turn around when they've been struggling and say, hey, on 4th and 4, I want you to go for it. Or are you going to turn to even 19 yards is better than field reversal right there on the 39 or 40.
I don't believe he was off the other night, though. Mahomes.
You don't believe he was off?
Not that game.
Not
Other
the
than the interception.
No. What about not? Let's eliminate the Justin Watson where he should have ran up the sideline and that drop. He chucked it and was off on a lot of throws when those boys were actually open. We're only singling out the big ones. But during that game, he missed a lot.
They MVS also ran Watson ran the wrong route.
Please don't tell me that Keys has drank the Kool-Aid and Keys is about to tell me no, Mahomes wasn't off that much. It wasn't that many drops. Wasn't that many drops that game.
I think he was on enough.
Yeah, I think he was on enough. I would agree with that. But I still think that, I mean, here's what you're saying, though, Gooch. You're saying, okay, we're going to punt the ball. All right. If the Eagles score it all, then we know we've lost the game because we can't count on our offense to go down the field. Because if we can't count on the offense to convert on a 4th and 3, we sure the hell can't count on the offense to move all the way down the field once again to win us the game. By the way, if we'd kicked the field goal and made it, it makes your whole last drive a hell of a lot different because you don't have to get a touchdown to win. That's a position you don't want this offense as it is to be in right now.
Completely agree.
If it had been 21-20, now you're back into Butker game. And you play that whole offensive series way different because you only need to get to the 30, 35-yard line to win the game instead of knowing you got to go all the way down the field and score a touchdown when your offense isn't doing that in the second half of games. And you've only did that twice in this game. And so, like, I disagree. You can argue whichever one you want, and I'm fine with that. As long as it's between kicking the field goal and going for it. You cannot punt in that situation and give away a possession. You can't do it there. Not in a game like this, not in a game where your offense looks like that.
Yep, that's pretty much where I'm at. So what else is going on? Sorry, I was concentrating on the chat and answering people.
Yeah, Chris says you addressed the OC change and the wide receiver coach change. Are those two the issue? You know, again, I don't know how much any of it is because it seems like the whole time, at least during the Mahomes era, you've had the same issues with wide receivers. You've had similar stretches, right? The only difference is the stretches have been small compared to this season where it's been season long, but in past, it seems like, you know, it's been stretches of games where the offense has been non-existent. It's been stretches, you know, a few games together where the offense has been non-existent. But this is the whole season so far. But we've still had it, right? We've still, like I said, when's the first time as a fan base we started talking about drops, guys? Super Bowl 55, right? That was the drop game. Mahomes was running for his life and he was throwing darts to receivers, and they were all doing what? They were all dropping it. All the way back in Super Bowl 55. This isn't a this year issue. It's not a Matt Nagy issue. It's not an Eric Bieniemy issue. This goes back farther than this year or last year. Well, I know where I stand because there's only two people that are, or three people. Well, you can't count Travis, really, because he's only one person and he's not throwing the ball and he's not the coach on the team. There's only two people that are common denominators in that whole period of time outside of Travis, and that's Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And they're both divinity, and nobody can say anything negative about either one of them. But when you see a common denominator, you got to start talking about the common denominator.
Sorry, dinner just got here.
Right.
Was there a question in there?
Yeah, the question was, are the OC change and the wide receiver coach change the issues?
It's hard to argue against it.
Well, I just did.
Both a factor.
Yeah, again, because I said, if you listen to what Larry said, it certainly sounds like the wide receiver coach is an issue, but at the same time, when it's been the same problems game in and game out, season after season, at some point you got to kind of ask what Andy Reid is asking his wide receivers and his wide receiver coaches to do.
Right. And we have no idea what they're doing.
Where is this at? All right. I'm going to pull this one up here. I'm just going to pull this one up here because at this point, all around the world, I'm just done with people talking about this and people saying we don't know. Jeff Schwartz, yesterday on Twitter the Twitter / the X, said Andy Reid calls the plays. Quite bluntly, Jeff Schwartz said Andy Reid calls the plays, same as it's been since 2013. I do not understand why this continues to be a topic of discussion. So, just throwing that out there. Jeff Schwartz said Andy calls the plays. Everybody stop talking about the play caller, where it's Nagy or Bieniemy. Both guys took heat when things have been going bad. I don't think EB got enough credit for, when things were going good.
Right.
But it's easy to make those guys the scapegoat. But here's my thing. I keep going back to what Gooch said, right? Gooch uses different language than I do, but, Gooch has always said, if everywhere you go, you meet someone who's a jerk, at some point you got to look in the mirror and realize maybe you're the jerk. Right? So what I'm saying is if we have the same issues with every offensive coordinator, we have the same issues with every wide receiver coach, we have the same issues with every wide receiver. Oh, by the way, this was one thing that was pointed out on KCSN by Seth Kaiser and Nate Taylor. Another common denominator, right? It's not Brett Veach, because these issues persisted with Alex Smith. They persisted with Patrick Mahomes. They persisted with John Dorsey. And they persisted with Brett Veach. Two different quarterbacks, two different GMs. The one common denominator is Andy Reid. That was kind of something that they talked about as well. It was Alex and Pat. It was John Dorsey and Brett Veach. Yet the problem has existed through all of them. 2 sets of GMs, 2 sets of offensive coordinators. At some point, you got to look at the one guy who is. I'm just going to leave it at that. Sorry. I'm not here to trash Andy.
I definitely wonder if Gooch is right about Bieniemy, though. All right, I'm going to be eating. I'll try to talk.
You're fine, but I mean, the other thing is, though, Gooch has said this numerous times as well. Sorry, Gooch, I'm going to throw your words back at you. But Gooch has talked about this as well, whether it's like a guy like Matt Patricia, you know, some of these coaches who are just like really hard on players. You know, Gooch has said numerous times at some point the players start tuning those voices out. The players start tuning those voices out and they lose their impact. And you have to have a fresh voice. So, you know, we were seeing all these fights last year. At what point were we quickly approaching the offensive players tuning EB out? So I don't think that we talk about that enough either. Robert, glad that you're with us this evening. Robert says, are we better off with this group or second tier wide receiver, including Robinson? Those guys dropped as much and ran routes short of the sticks constantly. Robinson fumbles and backtrack losses are gone. Yeah, I mean, you know, this is like, if you guys caught the special we did last night with Liz, who's Aaron's wife, and Hannah, my wife, and we were going to have Holly with us as well, but she wasn't feeling well. You know, we kind of got into this, and you know, like I asked the guys, what's the subtraction from last year's wide receiver room, right? The only subtraction from last year's wide receiver room is Juju. We've added Richie James, who's on IR, but he has great catch numbers, guys. I don't know if you guys saw that, but at least last year had great catch numbers. So if we get him back, you might get a reliable wide receiver who actually catches the ball. And that could end up being more impactful than any of us, you know, even expected. But outside of Juju, you've brought in Richie James, you brought in Rashee Rice, who has been, outside of Travis, the best receiver, in my opinion, that we've had on the team this year. I mean, you haven't subtracted anyone but Juju. So was Juju just that much greater than everything else we have in the wide receiver room right now? Like, I think that's the big question, right? But if it's me answering that, I don't want Robinson back. I did like Pringle. I thought Pringle was reliable. Robinson did have that game a few years ago against the Raiders where he lit them up. So I don't know. I mean, maybe you could say we were better off with those guys, but I don't know. Something just seems really, really off. And it's kind of frustrating that coming off the bye, it doesn't seem like we've figured that out as a coaching staff and as players. So, yeah, and I know I'll probably get called a homer for that, but you know, like I said, Kurt Warner said the same thing. I saw the clip on, I think it was the Rich Eisen's show, say, you know, coming into the game, he thought that the Eagles were clearly the better team, the more talented team. And after watching the game, outside of the final score, he came away utterly impressed with the Chiefs and thought that the Chiefs were actually the better team in the NFL. And so, you know, take that what you will. We're talking about all these, you know, wide receiver issues. At the end of the day, you know, as a team, it looks like we get even half of that figured out. This is going to be a really, 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 really hard team to beat. So, Scott says, Robert, this group includes MVS, but not Juju. Well, yeah, so did last year's team, but we had Juju. And there's no counting for, like, you can't assume that last year's Juju is going to be this year's Juju because of the health, right? The health of that knee. But at least right now, it looks like we could use him actually catching the ball. What do you guys think? If we had Juju right now and we still had Rashee Rice, do you think that Juju and Rashee Rice would be enough to force teams to stop doubling and tripling Travis? If you guys can talk. You might not be able to talk.
You don't need Juju.
You don't think so?
Nope. What they need is to give Rice more targets. The reason the offense was effective last year and Travis got his 1,000 yards and people were double teaming him as often is because Juju could catch. Juju was sure-handed. So you had to defend it. Even though Juju basically ran the same routes as Travis, Mahomes trusted him because he was a solid 1A in Pittsburgh with Antonio Brown. So regardless of health, if you threw the ball at him, he'd catch it. They had to defend that, which is why he almost had 1,000 yards with Kelsey. Once you find the one person, once you give Rashee or somebody else enough snaps so they can get comfortable and become that threat, and somebody takes that role, Travis will be rolling again. And then nobody will be talking about the receivers because everybody else's job will be easier and more catches will happen. And then all these fans will say, I knew they'd turn it around. We were bitching about nothing. And for the record, only because I just want to get this out. After what I've been through, I'm really in no mood to argue, but if I was a head coach and we were going to have that argument, and my defense is the number one defense in the NFL, number one scoring defense, and the numbers say, go for it on 4th and 4, miss and give them 60 yards, or punt and make them go 80, I'm going 80. Because the same people that are making the argument, company included, have Butker kick a 60, 56, 57 yarder in downpouring rain and 35-degree weather with the wind swirling around, or go for it on 4th down, would be the same people if Andy did it and failed, would say you should have at least tried to punt it and made them go longer because your defense is the number one defense. Can't have it both ways. I'm just saying.
Sorry, this is the 4th down decision bot right here that the analytics people have out there. Kansas City has 4th and 4 at the Philadelphia 39, 4th quarter, 8:56 to go. Recommendation medium, go for it. By going for it, you add 1.3 win probability, the actual play, the Chiefs punt into the end zone. So you see the numbers there. If you go for it, you have a 74% chance of winning. Yes, you have a 48% chance of success. Your win percentage, if you fail on your attempt to go for it, is 64%. If you succeed, it goes up to 85%. Field goal attempt, 70%. If you go for the field goal attempt there, you have a 43% chance of success. If you fail, your win percentage is 63% versus 64% if you fail going for it. Your win percentage, if you succeed, is 80% versus 85% if you go for it. Punt gives you a 73% chance of winning there. So the analytics would say you're better off going for it.
Wait. Are you trying to use numbers that give you percentages in ideal conditions like the offense that tell you should go 35? Are you
No,
serious?
these account for
Are you
conditions.
seriously going to give me numbers that would give you ideal conditions that don't account for tired, that don't account for wet gloves, wet hands, slippery fields? You're going to use as the basis for an argument of why you should go for it? Like human error, if he takes off the line on your route that you're going to go for and slips and falls, if the ball slips out of their hands on a lateral and fumbles, I mean, this is the argument.
Is this really your argument, Gooch? Because it accounts for stuff. So I'll tell you what we know is we gave away a possession and we lost the game. So we do know that much. We know that what happened after we punted that ball was not good for us.
That isn't the reason why we lost the game. That point. Okay.
Oh, we lost this game for a number of reasons, but that was definitely one that was a very questionable decision. Like at some point, you have to trust your offense because you can't keep putting it all on your defense. This was a team that played you in the Super Bowl last year and scored 35 points in the Super Bowl against you. This is a team that still has A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and still has Jalen Hurts as his quarterback and one of the top offensive lines in the NFL. Like, you can't keep putting it all on your defense, and you're at the 39-yard line. It's just hard to see a wasted possession like that. But anyway, Scott says, Robert, this group includes MBS, but not Juju. We talked about that. Scott says, Juju produced head and shoulders better than any other wide receiver we have on the roster. Now, I don't know if I would say head and shoulders above Rice. Would you guys say head and shoulders above Rice? I think clearly better than Rice, but head and shoulders seems maybe a little bit too much.
And clearly better than Rice, I would beg. They're on pace for the same amount of yardage in the same number of games. Like, they're halfway through the season. Rice has about 500 yards, and Juju finished the season under 1,000. Like, Rice is going to be right at those numbers with receptions. I just don't think he probably would bypass it if he got more than 51% of the snaps. I know they're trying to, or Nagy is saying that they're trying to just slowly continue to bring him along and build him up for the playoffs. But you need somebody to take the pressure off Travis, let the big dog eat. You know what I'm saying? The kid is good. Get him the ball quick and let him start getting downhill. And he's like Pacheco with the ball. He runs hard. He avoids contact better than Pacheco. But, well, I won't say better. Pacheco looks for contact and Rasheed tries to avoid it. Give him the ball, let him run. But I wouldn't say better. I wouldn't say head and shoulders. I mean, the only thing that Juju really has is the experience. But Rice is clearly on pace with receptions and yards to match what Juju did last year. Have you guys ever had sweet potato pie?
Yes.
Okay.
Were you going to come bring us some?
I was actually in line at a Walmart. I'm sorry, and I was discussing sweet potato pie, and I didn't know. This isn't intended to be racist, so please don't take it as such. But I was surrounded by a bunch of white people who had never had sweet potato pie. Like, of course they've had pumpkin pie, but they were like, sweet potato pie. What's that? Like, I'm like, seriously? Like, I'm like, you guys have no culture. Yeah, it's not even that. Like, I'm actually being funny with the no culture thing. I was just curious as if you guys had sweet potato pie because it just seemed odd to me that nobody, like, I was standing around like 10 people who had never had it. And so I just thought I'd ask. Sorry, but Thanksgiving tomorrow, I thought I'd ask. My bad. Off subject.
No, you're fine. I mean, tomorrow's Thanksgiving, so it's on subject. But I mean, you know that we lived in Mississippi for 7.5 years. So yeah, there was a lot of cultural things that I've gotten experience with, and that was one of them. And I had a lot of interesting stuff down there.
Yeah,
Sorry, one Thanksgiving we got invited over back when we had a much smaller family. We got invited over to a coworker's family for Thanksgiving. It would have been about the only Thanksgiving we got that year. But it was things like, man, I don't even know. I don't know if Hannah's in the chat to fill me in or not since she's at work. But like okra some way. I don't remember how it was. Oh man, I'm forgetting like all these things that like there's stuff that I've had before, and then there's stuff that I hadn't had before, and it's just like, okay, this is interesting, like, oh yeah, I kind of like this. This is good. But my grandmother, like her family, and I don't know like how far back, but like I don't know if it was her mother or her grandmother, like that family was like in the Pascagoula area. So like a lot of my grandmother's recipes kind of had a southern twang to them. But yeah, I picked up a lot at some of the places that I'd worked. But yeah, I don't mind some of the stereotypes either, Gooch. I love chicken and waffles, and
That's good stuff. Chicken and waffles is good stuff, brother. That's good stuff. Um, and I didn't mean to get a switch to food. And I wanted to say, Scott,
again,
Andy did say something about Jet McKinnon, and that he's 33, which is old for a running back. He's had 2 ACL surgeries, I think, if not 2, at least 1. And he did get a lot of mileage last year. So they're really kind of watching his workload to make sure he's fresh in the playoffs, which Andy had a press conference that he's been trying to do that with Travis too, which could explain why Travis is trying to do so much when he's out there, which could explain the fumble. But I do know that about Jet. He did say that about Jet. Like he's been pulling him out, trying to keep him fresh. It was good to see Tony for a few more than one snap, and he was actually productive when he got the ball. So there's that. I wouldn't worry too much. Like Mahomes says they're going to figure it out, and I believe him.
yeah, Travis said the same thing, but they've been kind of saying it for about 5 or 6 weeks now, haven't they?
Yeah, the problem is they're still doing the same thing that I said they shouldn't do after the bye. Rice's snaps went up, but you still are rotating way too many people in, and there's not enough rhythm. Football is a rhythm game, rhythm and momentum. And I don't think these guys are getting the rhythm. Yeah, first half we're top 3 in scoring and yards and all that. But when the second half comes and you're not running the scripted 15, 20, these guys they're just not getting consistent snaps so they can get into rhythm and break some of these terrible scoreless streaks we're having. That's just my personal opinion. We can argue this one because I wouldn't say I'm right or wrong in this one. It's just how I feel because I watched the game twice. It's on. I watch it when it's on, then I watch it again on the NFL app because then they do it without the commercials, so I
Right.
can watch the whole thing. And that's just what I see. But again, not an expert, strictly a fan of the team.
Yeah, and man, I don't know, like, how healthy McKinnon is, but he had what, 3 touches in this game? 2 touches, 3 touches in this game, right? And it's like, man, maybe they are seriously just slow playing it to death. Um, but there's just so many questions that everybody has, and it seems like we're in that position every year now for the last few years. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think you're right, Gooch. One of the things that Larry said on that chief concerns interview was like Jason specifically, or maybe it was Marcus, specifically asked him about the way the Chiefs were rotating 6 or 7 guys in, and he very pointedly said, "Hey, your number one receiver is your number one receiver. Your number two receiver is your number two receiver. Your number three receiver is your number three receiver, and those guys should be the ones who are predominantly getting the snaps. And if you have a long drive." Where they need a breather because it's a long drive, sure, rotate other guys in. Otherwise, your top 3 or 4 should be your top 3 or 4, period. Um, and I don't remember now if it was I think it was Eli Manning on the Manning cast, because that's what I watched. And part of that is because I'm not listening to those idiots talk on the ESPN crew. And
I love Peyton and Eli.
if there's a Manning cast, I want to hear I want to hear their insights. Um, you know, um, and sometimes the guests are interesting too. But I want to hear what's going through their mind and what they have to say, in the game. So that's what I'm watching there. And I think it was Eli who said, basically the Eagles' offense is a small number of plays that they practice and practice and practice, so that they're really good at. You know what I mean? And that makes sense because Sirianni was with the Colts. I want to say back. I don't think it was in the Manning days, right? But it was at some point in the last 10 years or so. I should double check that. But Nick Sirianni was with the Colts, I do believe, at some point, or maybe he had his Tom Moore connection some other way. By the way, Aaron, Nick Sirianni's got to be at the top of the list now of most punchable faces, right? Like he
Uh,
has to be. He
uh,
has to be up there.
Somebody put somewhere him talking that trash in the locker room
Yeah.
or walking down the tunnel. And I thought that when I first saw it, I was like, man, I just want to punch that guy. Just, oh,
Yeah.
hey, Scott, in all honesty, dog, the wide receiver room doesn't have to be scary. They just have to be consistent. Like,
Right.
consistent is what would make them scary. Because if you have to account, right now, nobody's really accounting for them and they're focused on Travis. Once one guy starts catching more on the regular and they can't account for Travis, they're going to be scary. Scary doesn't always, in my mind, again, not an expert. I've had family in the NFL, but I'm not one of them. Scary would be AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and AJ Brown had 1 catch for 8 yards. You know what I'm saying? Like, scary doesn't always necessitate a win, or at least them being a major part of it.
Right.
It's just they just need to be consistent. I don't want them to be scary because scary means they cost more money and people pay more attention. I just need them to be consistent.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that's kind of what they were hoping to go for, is if they have a large group of guys who are consistent and not necessarily a star like Tyreek where you have to worry about, 25, 30 million, you know, a year contracts, then, you can do some damage with a room of 3 or 4 guys who are consistent. So Gooch is 100% right. If they're just consistent, they'll be good enough because, for all Juju, was before he got to Kansas City, was he really much more than consistent last year? Like, maybe at times, but for the whole season, was he really much more than just consistent?
No, he was a 4, 5, 6 reception guy for somewhere between 70 to 80 yards. But it was enough, you know what I'm saying, that you had to account for it every time he was on the field, which freed it up for Travis on the other side. And consistent. So if you do have the breakout guy, you don't have to worry about if you're going to pay him 25, 30, he can go because you've got other consistent guys who didn't get the majority of those balls that you can still pay and keep them along. I mean, I think the end goal is is to get a group of guys that are consistent enough that you can run this for 3, 4 more years and then start drafting their replacements so that there's a revolving door of just consistency. The one thing that made Brady great, in my opinion, or those teams, the New England teams, is outside of Randy Moss and Gronk, and you can throw Edelman in if you want. I just think they were consistent, year in, year out, a bunch of consistent, kind of just second tier guys that loved the game and was just there. Like, you know what I'm saying? Just day in, day out, not going to get big numbers, but consistently a part of the offense, making catches and stuff like that. And it just turns out that a lot of catches that would be routine were big catches because they were in bigger games, and I think that's where they're trying to get. Obviously not completely following the Patriot model. I'm not trying to say Patriot way. I'm just saying that when your quarterback is 13% of your salary cap, you know what I'm saying? You've got to kind of bargain shop. You know what I'm saying? Like, you buy a house, you're not shopping at Whole Foods. Yeah, that's just the best analogy I could come up with at the time. But consistency, in my opinion, would make them supremely scary. You get Travis, who's all world and first ballot Hall of Famer, you know what I'm saying, the second he hangs them up. And you give him 2 guys who can give you 5, 6 catches a game. Now you're talking.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes into what I was starting to talk about there is, Eli was talking about the Eagles have a much smaller set of plays, right? That playbook is much smaller set of plays, and they practice and practice and practice and practice those plays. And because it's such a smaller number of plays, you have the chance to get much better at those plays. And one of the things Eli said was he thought that part of the wide receiver issue in Kansas City is how many plays Andy Reid has in his playbook, to where even, especially as a rookie or second year wide receiver, you're not practicing the plays that much. You can't possibly practice the plays in the playbook that much and really get them down the same way, which, I found interesting because, like I said, Sirianni was with the Colts 2018 to 20 or so. I don't remember when Tony Dungy left the Colts, but that was something that he was always big on with the Buccaneers and the Colts was, drilling, simplifying things, doing a small number of things, and being really good at those things that I think you see carrying over one way or the other through Sirianni to what the Eagles are doing versus what the Chiefs are doing. And so it kind of comes back to that consistency thing, is like, how much is that consistency an issue because of the large volume of plays that Andy Reid has in his playbook? So the receivers don't get to practice all these routes with Mahomes every week because there's just so many. There's so many plays. There's so many routes. Now you have so many receivers. And it's kind of like we really haven't simplified things. I believe that was Eli Manning who was talking about that whole part of it, that he thought it was the receivers because of the number of plays in the Chiefs playbook being such a high volume thing with it. So
I'm gonna hit a couple comments real quick, and I'm with you on that, Keys. I'm gonna, man, I hate when you guys make me quote Colin Cowherd on this pod. So shout out to him.
you do that so much. I don't think you really hate it. I think you love it.
Well, because some of the stuff, like I listen to just about everybody. Like I listen to Nick Wright and Colin and Rich Eisen and Dan Patrick, and then I jump on, listen to all the Chiefs stuff from KCSN. I don't listen to the One Chiefs channel because they're always trying to sell something in between every question. But I don't pay much to them. But like Brady had a great defense the first few years, but then the offense was the key factor in that. And I think it's the reverse for the Chiefs now. We had the great offense, and now we've got the great defense, and it's time to be different. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a different phase of basically the dynasty run. Because now you put all that, hey Hannah, how you doing? You put all those resources into defense. Those kids are still young. It's great defense. And now you don't need a number one offense. You just need a top 10 if the defense is playing like that. And yes, there's a lot of drops. I hate to tell y'all, we have led the league or not led the league, but we have been high up on that list in drops every single year. The year we won the first Super Bowl, Tyreek led the league in drops. But we don't talk about that when we're winning. Tyreek's leading the league in drops now with Miami, but they're winning, so you don't talk about that much. And right now we're seeing all these faults because it doesn't look like it's looked in past. And the weird thing is we have now been spoiled because of the Super Bowl wins. I remember a time when we were like,
Uh-oh. Hey, Hannah. Good to see you again. You're muted, Steve.
Thank you, Aaron. I was saying I'm way behind on the comments here. I'm all the way back at 819-ish or so. But Scott says, but the free agent and draft moves are less simple. If we had drafted a starting left tackle, right tackle in the last 5 years, we don't feel compelled to drop $20 million a year this offseason. Scott, I think the biggest thing is we haven't really been in that position to get a first-round talent at either position. And so, and I know you got another comment here with that.
We had capital to trade, though.
Sure, but it still takes a team that's willing to trade, and it takes a guy out there that you like enough to do so. Let me find Scott's other comment here because I think it goes. They kind of go together. And if we didn't have to blow $20 million a right tackle, then the money was there to pay Juju. I think there's two things with that. Is one, Juju's knee was really scary, and I don't think the medical staff felt good about it moving forward. So I think that's its own thing. As far as the right tackle, Scott then goes on to say that's a roster construction issue, which falls under the jurisdiction of the GM. I disagree with that. I think this is 100% on Andy Reid and Andy Heck, because I don't think Brett Veach is the one who is saying, hey, we 100% need to go out and get Juwan Taylor. I think this is 100% Andy Reid and Andy Heck saying, you know what? We see a lot of things we like in Juwan Taylor. I think we can convert him to a left tackle. And then Brett Veach is like, okay, well, we're going to have to pay him money. And I won't even say left tackle money around 20 million is top right tackle money right now. But I don't think, and you guys can disagree with me, but I don't think he's any worse than, I don't think he's even as bad as Andrew Wiley, as far as athletically speaking and pass blocking. I think both offensive tackles are downgrade run blocking, but I think athletically and pass blocking, both offensive tackles we added this offseason are better than Orlando Brown Jr. and Andrew Wiley. And when you factor in how much cheaper you got Donovan Smith for this season than paying Orlando Brown Jr. what he wanted in Kansas City and what he got from the Bengals, I think it kind of, evens itself out. Like, I think you just can't say 20 million a year for Jawan Taylor. I think you have to say, 28 million for both your left tackle and right tackle, and look at it that way for this season, because they might move him to left tackle next year. We don't know what's going to happen there. They thought they might have a guy in Wanye Morris. They thought they had a guy in Lucas Niang who couldn't stay healthy. Donovan Smith is a stopgap player, and that was kind of a win-win signing, because if he blows up and has a great year, he's going to get a good contract next year, and you're going to get a comp pick for him. It's like, who out there is available? Trent Williams basically had his second 3-year contract picked up by the 49ers. How many great left tackles are out there worth? You don't want to repeat doing what you did for Orlando for another Orlando caliber player. It's hard to keep winning, filling your holes that way. So, who's out there? You can make a play for Tristan Wirfs next year.
How did we pull off Donovan Smith's contract as a left tackle?
I mean, part of it was because of the injury issues, and he had a down year, but I don't think people looked at the full context of Ryan Jensen went down, preseason. The backup center went down. The left guard retired in the offseason going into last season. So, there's all kinds of discontinuity there. And then Tristan Wirfs was injured at some point. So the whole offensive line was battered by that point. So, yeah, I'm going to try to get through these a little bit faster, but
I think the Donovan Smith signing was genius, simply because even if you don't move Jawan Taylor to left tackle and you draft somebody, he's young. But now you've got the room when Smith's contract is up to try and extend Creed and Smith. And you might be able to get Kenny back on something cheaper because he's getting older. Like, I think that move was made to keep a youngish line intact for the future. And since we're going through that, Casey, you just said, Gooch, do you think the Chiefs defense can carry the team to the Super Bowl with the offense as is? Yes, I think they can. Now, barring something catastrophic, like, I really think the defense is good enough to get through the AFC. In the Super Bowl, I think it depends on, I think this defense can run with anybody. I just think the offenses they're going to face, I think they can. The toughest test would be Baltimore if they got that far. But I think the defense is good enough. And the offense, it can stand to be better, but I think it's good enough. I'm going to say this, I think Cleveland makes the playoffs and their defense is good enough to get them a game, maybe two, because of how good they are with their offense and that rookie. You know what I'm saying? I think when you get into the playoffs, all the stuff that we're seeing right now, the defense is playing faster, and I think they're going to start to stand out. And hopefully, the offensive struggles have been put to bed a little bit. And I think they can. I actually would love to see a rematch of Philadelphia and Kansas City with the roles being reversed. You know what I'm saying? The Eagles went into the Super Bowl with that heralded defense that we put 38 on. And it would be interesting to see, you know, the juggernaut Philadelphia Eagles offense, I say that loosely, um, against the Chiefs grade A defense. That's just me. I kind of hit both topics, so I apologize if it kind of got off of.
No, you're good. So Chris with Kansas City area youth jazz said, is it the young wide receiver coach perhaps using too many receivers in the rotation? I don't think that's the wide receiver coach. I think that's an Andy Reid thing. I don't think that Connor Embry, I don't think he's a lot more than, much more than a yes man on this offensive coaching staff. Like he has his responsibilities, but like he's not making the decisions on what the wide receiver rotation is and who the guys are. At least I don't think so. What do you guys, am I off on that one? Like the guys that are playing are the guys that Andy wants, right? And I would even say before people attack Brett Veach, for either who he brought in or for what moves he didn't make at the trade deadline, the receivers on this roster are the receivers that Andy Reid wanted on this roster. I don't see this as a Brett Veach thing. I see this as an Andy Reid. This is Andy Reid's team. I mean, am I wrong on this, guys?
No.
I think that's the area, one of the areas where they miss being. Because you said it, like the wide receivers coach is just a yes man. And I think Nags wanting to, now, yes, I think if you are a hard ass on people all the time, you start to lose the room. You know what I'm saying? Because either like we understand that we've got to yada, 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 but I think a lot of the fights are because the enemy doesn't agree with certain things. So he's the one person that's saying no. And yeah, he had a fight with Mahomes, but you're talking about a quarterback who has God-given ability. So of course he wants to throw the ball. You know what I'm saying? Of course he wants to pull the ball out during RPOs and stuff like that. And he may not agree with certain runs. You know what I mean? So I mean, I think a lot of that is what's missing. Again, the accountability thing. Like Andy has got his 2 Super Bowls, certified Hall of Famer. I'm not saying he doesn't want to win, because if you're in that business, you want to win. Winning is like the ultimate goal. But I think now there's nobody to be like, nah, it's not a good idea. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's where the disconnect is. I think, and you're never too old, so please don't take this the wrong way. You're never too old to start drinking your own Kool-Aid. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're really not. And sometimes you need that one jackwagon in the group to be like, hey, that's stupid. You know what I'm saying? Let's not do that. And I think you need that voice. And I think I would like to say that during that Eagles game that Andy started to see it, because I've never seen him yell stop and try to correct Patrick like that during a game from the sideline. And I've never seen him snarl at Kelsey and yell at Kelsey like he did during that game. There's a couple of clips of it. So I don't know if he's starting to figure it out.
That's true.
But yeah, I think that's where it is. Sorry.
Well, let me ask you this, Gooch, because you saying that brings up kind of an interesting point. Just came to me here. Do you think that Andy doing, while I find him hilarious, and I'm sure you guys too, do you think that Andy kind of breaking that, kind of broke a line, kind of a roll line, in doing that commercial with Pat that kind of puts him in a compromising, position, from this offseason onward because of it? Or, is it just a silly thing to even bring up?
I don't think it's silly, because I think with a lot of coaches, I think that would be a fair point. But at 60 something years old, I think his wife is telling him to do it. Get out there, get his appreciation. You know what I'm saying? Like, because he's constantly heralded as, you know, the greatest offensive mind of this generation. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of people really don't, outside of football, doesn't know who he is. You know what I mean? Unless you follow football, you don't know who Big Red is. You know, and I actually find him hilarious that he's actually getting out there because he's always just seemed like the good old ball coach. You know what I'm saying? Ball is what he does, and nobody knows that he has this hilarious side to him. You know what I'm saying? I think it's great. But I also like to think that Patrick is humble enough to know that there's a line you don't cross. I'm friends with people I still answer to at my job. You know what I'm saying? And we talk outside of work and stuff, but I know when it comes to work, there's a line I don't cross. You know what I'm saying? And I think they have that, hopefully, they have that understanding that it wouldn't change anything. I think with any other coach, though, legit point.
All right, so Aaron, I don't know who Aaron is, but Aaron said, I wonder if MBS being the leader in that room and going by example is having a negative effect on the rest of the room, though, too. And Aaron, that's something they actually brought up in that Chief Concerns interview. You guys should all check it out. And I'm going to stop telling everyone to check it out. But that was kind of one of the things that was said is MVS is the oldest receiver, you know, in that room. One of the things that Coach Larry talked about was, because Jason asked him, you know, pointedly, he talked about T.O., you know, picking up from Jerry Rice, right? So he watched what Jerry did, and you know, he figured it out by watching Jerry. You know, which again is different from the Nate Taylor and Seth Kaiser and JJ Briscoe basically saying that, you know, wide receivers basically don't change from the, you know, they are who they are when they're drafted. Like they don't really change. And I don't believe that has to be, you know, that has to be the way it is. But one of the things that Coach Larry said was, so then Jason asked him, well, you know, what about someone like Andre Johnson? Because he didn't have, you know, he wasn't like T.O. where he had a Jerry Rice to watch and learn from, you know, and to emulate on the field. And so, you know, it's kind of like that thing is like, it doesn't matter, you know, Tyreek's gone now. Tyreek didn't have that guy. You know, Tyreek didn't have a Jerry Rice to emulate.
Here's the thing. That's one of the things that most people who have been in any kind of management position in any kind of field of business will tell you. That's one of the things that I had to learn. There are some people who are great number twos, but they will never have the will, the drive, the mentality, or anything to be a number one. You know what I'm saying? Like for all his cuckoo-ness and craziness, Juju learned from one of the greatest receivers in the game because Antonio Brown was that. You know what I'm saying? So even if he was never successfully a number one, he learned how to be one, how to carry himself when Antonio Brown was at his kind of most professional before he lost his mind. Jerry Rice learned from, or T.O. learned from Jerry. You know what I'm saying? Tyreek didn't have that guy, but we had a lot of professionals when he started. Think about Jeremy Maclin, who was the constant. Tyreek just wanted to be great and wanted to be the number one, so he put the work in. MVS has always been a number two or a number three. I mean, he was a number two, K-State wide receiver, white boy.
Jordy
Nelson. Yeah, he was number two to Jordy. And then you had Randall Cobb, so he was probably the number three. You know what I'm saying? Like even the last years before he came, he was number two to Devontae. You know, so I don't think he knows, I don't know if he doesn't have the drive. You know what I'm saying? Like some things you just can't teach. And you either got it or you don't. And I think that if he's the leader in the locker room, you need somebody else who wants to have that dog in him to be the number one. You can't use like that guy. Like even in my business, like I've got plenty of people who, you know, I can trust them run a store for me, but I would never give them full control. Like, you can run a store for me for 2 or 3 days a week, but I need somebody else to sit in the big chair and make the bigger decisions because you're not going to be able to do it. That's just my personal opinion. You guys can, we can dispute that if you want.
Yeah, I'm not going to dispute it, but I want to come back to the first thing you said, Goot, because what I think I remember you saying is, as a manager and a leader, like, you can identify those guys fairly quickly whether they're a number one or a number two.
No,
Basically.
absolutely. You give me 2 weeks, maximum 3 with somebody that wants to do what I do or what some we do, whatever like that. I can tell you if they've got it or not, just by how they carry themselves. You know what I'm saying? Their confidence level when they talk to me, how they act around other people. I can tell you, like, okay, he'll be a good this, but he'll never be that. You know what I'm saying? I'm usually right, but I have been wrong before.
So would you say then that, because, as we already pointed out, the wide receiver issues we've had were before Brett Veach as well. They were John Dorsey, they were Brett Veach, they were Alex Smith, they were Patrick Mahomes. Andy Reid's the common denominator there. So would you say that, I don't think we would say Andy is a bad judge of whether a guy is a number one or number two. Maybe we would. I wouldn't. I would probably tend to say that means that Andy is picking guys who are number twos. Do you think that's fair to say?
I think that's a two-edged sword. I believe that Andy's a great evaluator of talent. Otherwise, he wouldn't have 120 plus wins with 2 different franchises.
That's why I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm asking if.
But I also believe that there are some instances where he still, in his mind, is part GM, and he believes that his system doesn't necessarily need that alpha wide receiver. Because aside from T.O. in Philadelphia, I don't think he really had, would you call Deshaun Jackson a number one? He really didn't have a number one in Philly. You know what I'm saying? And for all of our receivers outside of Tyreek, I don't think he really had a number one. Bo was number one by default, but he wouldn't be on another team and be a number one in his prime. I think he believes in the system sometimes more than the talent. And then if you get a number one, what are the chances that you get one and he's a diva? And then he causes problems with the chemistry in the locker room. Or 2 years in, now he wants $35 million a year and he's going to hold out or whatever like that. Sometimes I think smart people like Andy Reid sometimes are too smart for their own good and they outthink themselves.
I do.
Does that make sense?
Yep, it makes sense because I know I do it. And yeah, you're right. I think Pittsburgh is great at identifying great receivers, but outside of Juju, the great receivers they've identified have ended up, one way or another being kind of head cases. And even looking at Tyreek, whether they accidentally identified an alpha there, I think the whole thing about him wanting more targets when he ended up with like 169 last year and all that drama, I think what you said, it would only, if you're Andy Reid, it would only make you double down on that after putting up with Tyreek's crap last year. But I guess so, again, it kind of goes back to what I said was, so are we saying Andy, is kind of purposely picking number twos? But the question might even be, is he actually picking number twos or is he picking number threes? Because a lot of the guys, we would say they're number 3 wide receivers, right? We have a team full of number 3 wide receivers talent wise, but mentally, what's the difference between, not an alpha. We know what an alpha is, but what's the difference between the mindset of a guy who's like a number two, where if he was an alpha, he could clearly be a number one. But what's the difference between that guy and the wide receivers we have in our room? And I think Rashee Rice can be that. I don't think Brett Veach has a problem identifying alphas. I would say Pacheco's there, right? In the running back room. Yeah, I don't know.
I think a lot of it is because I have to watch what I say because I don't want it to come across as saying like Andy is purposely selecting these guys because then it sounds like, oh, he doesn't believe in winning or what I'm saying, this, that, and the other, or he's on purpose trying to sabotage the team just to make them good enough, whatever like that. That's not the case. Like you don't get paid millions of dollars and have one of only 32 jobs to ride the fence and be average. You don't do that.
I think they're waiting too long to actually draft a number one.
Well, Rashee Rice was second round, and I just want to the Tyreek thing. First of all, he had the desire to be a number one because I don't know if anybody remembers, Tyreek wasn't Tyreek when he started. He was McCole Hardman.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? He just ended up putting in the work all year round to make himself better. Nobody knew that he was going to cause the issues. I want more targets, but you got the ball thrown to you 130 times last year and had over 100 catches, 110 catches. I mean, you don't foresee that, but I think part of it is first he had the issue with T.O. because T.O. became a problem. And then you get Tyreek, and Tyreek becomes a problem. And for anybody that deals with, I mean, Aaron, he had a guy that he works with not too long ago that was giving him gray hair, and that guy was, I mean, if you have to deal with that every day, eventually you either want to punch them or
right.
make them have an accident so they're not coming back. You know what I'm saying? I just and Tyreek was sneaky, which nobody even really saw. Like even when they was like, "Oh, the Chiefs didn't do this," well, my agent tried to force them to give me a contract. Well, your agent's not doing that without your consent. So in reality, you were trying to play games, and Andy doesn't have time for that. So I think a lot of it is he's instead of talent alone, I think he's looking for a certain mentality. You know what I'm saying? And it turns out that these guys just aren't maturing or they're not growing into their talent as fast as the guys who could be head cases and give you problems. And I think that for all the crap that we're struggling with as far as drops and stuff like this, I think we will see less next year. And I think the Chiefs are going to draft more wide receivers in the second round. I think MVS is gone. I think Justin is going to be, he's got his second year. I don't know if it's a player option or a team option, but if he comes back, it'll be to teach the offense, you know what I'm saying, and be kind of like the Danny Amendola to the Julian Edelman. You know what I'm saying? The guy just kind of comes in and runs a few routes, makes a couple catches, and then he's back out.
I mean,
But
he
I
could
don't
be a
know.
very solid, Pringle, Robinson type of snaps guy easily.
Right, right.
He'd be a great number three, a pretty good number three and a really good number four out there. You just don't want him. I don't think you want him as number one or two.
I think
Who was that?
Justin Watson.
I think Richie James is off the IR, and I think he's going to play against the Raiders this week. I think you start giving him shots, seeing what he's got. I think Kadarius Toney's snaps are going to keep going up, but I think he's going to be more McCole Hardman, like what you were saying, running back, short passes in open space, kick returner or punt returner, sorry. And then I think you just ride it out and see what happens. But you also got to rein it. Like we're talking receivers too. We also got to get Mahomes. Those guys can't grow if Mahomes won't throw them the ball either. You know what I'm saying? And I think some of it is rapport and the fact that when things break down, the first place and only place he looks is Travis. And then by the time he looks somewhere else, those guys are, like they're still really learning. Outside of MVF, who, let's face it, 33 million for 3 years. We all scoffed at that contract. But
Rightfully so.
So Scott asks, what do you think about Brady's comments about NFL teams currently being super sloppy, etc., especially pertaining to our Chiefs? I didn't hear the comments myself, but what do you guys think about Brady's comments about NFL teams currently being super sloppy? I guess for me, I would probably say it's more of a youth culture thing, as far as work habits from the individual players themselves, which is something that Coach Larry, talked about, is the younger receivers in the NFL today. They don't have Jerry Rice's work ethic. They don't have Terrell Owens' work ethic. They don't have Andre Johnson's work ethic. They're not putting in the work because they're more athletically gifted. And it takes us back, Gooch, right, to our Tyreek Hill versus McCole Hardman, where, Tyreek is the epitome of having the talent and actually putting in the hard work with it and what can happen. Whereas McCole's kind of you have the athletic ability and you don't have the work ethic.
You went to Andre Johnson. I like that. And then, I try not to think about Brady at all. I don't care for that guy. Peyton Manning's fucking hilarious, but
I don't want to
can't
bring
stand Brady.
I don't want to bring religion into this. My father was a religious man, and it's one of the things that he told my brothers and my cousins and stuff like that is when God gives you a gift, if you don't use it, eventually you lose it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and with McCall, he's got God-given athletic ability, but doesn't want to put in the work to keep up with it and put it to good use. You know what I'm saying? And Brady, Aaron hates Brady, but I think a lot of what he said was right. The stuff is the product is sloppy, and he's like he pointed out like defenseless receivers and stuff like that, and he's like, I don't understand, or defenseless quarterbacks or whatever, and he was like, I don't understand how you can be defenseless. You know what I'm saying? Like they teach you how to defend yourself on the offensive side of the ball. He's like, when I was quarterbacking, if Ray Lewis was in the middle of the field, I didn't throw my receivers to the middle of the field because I didn't want them getting hurt because Ray Lewis was going to lay the wood. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't throw them in that direction so they wouldn't get hit and hurt. It's their job to protect themselves. My job as the quarterback to help protect them. You know what I'm saying? There's no such thing as a defenseless player. You're playing football in pads. You know what I'm saying? You're going to get hit. And now because everything's regulated, nobody's being taught how to defend themselves because now the defensive player has to protect you as well as protect themselves. You know what I'm saying? So how can you do that and then put a good product on the field? You can't.
I don't think that happens as much anymore either.
Well, no, because all the guys who
quarterbacks protecting the receivers.
Right. Because now you're expecting the defensive players to protect your guys. You know what I'm saying? And the one thing I liked about the Philly Chiefs game is there was a couple of questionable hits that did not get called because they just let them lay the wood. But you don't have people like Ray Lewis. I mean, I think the closest to Ray Lewis now is Warner in San Francisco. You know what I'm saying? And that's it. You know, I mean, it's Reed. Reed would probably, he's a good hard hitter, but he does it the right way because he was taught right. But you don't get those games anymore. And I like those games. Even though we lost, like I would watch that game every day of the week just because it was good. It was hard hitting. The calls were kind of 50-50. It was solid. You know what I'm saying? I kind of agree with him. Like I like touchdowns, and the league is leading to that. High scoring brings in fans, brings in money, and stuff like that. But there's something about, like, and I'm not saying every game, but there's something about two good teams and a 17-10 game. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just interesting to me because it keeps you engaged. You know what I mean? And defenses are playing solid on both sides. There's good hits. There's good tackling. You know what I'm saying? Like I would watch that kind of football. I don't need 38-35 every game. It's like baseball. Greg Maddux versus Randy Johnson. Give me a 1-0 baseball game. I'm locked in. As a Yankees fan, it hurt me to say Greg Maddux and Randy Johnson, but that was the best analogy I come up with because baseball's weak too.
How are you a Yankees fan?
Honestly, Jeter. Somebody who didn't like a lot of people fawn over Jeter, but the one thing that I liked about him is he was an average guy. He didn't have the super strong arm. He wasn't elite fast. He wasn't amazing at the plate. But when it was crunch time, the dude made plays. You know what I'm saying? He was just your average guy playing baseball and was above average at it. But if you look at any metric, he wasn't phenomenal at anything. And I can appreciate that.
I guess I can accept that.
I'm just I'm a fan of I'm just a fan of, like, because when he came in, like, he didn't start being a captain. He wasn't even supposed to make the Yankees. You know what I'm saying? So I'm a fan of anybody that can just buck the odds. You know what I'm saying? And do something great.
Hey, Daryl.
I'm that kind of person. Like I'm a huge fan of Alex Smith because everybody considered him a wash. 7 coordinators in 8 years, this, that, and the other. And then when he finally got Harbaugh and got some stability, he took he outplayed Drew Brees, and if it wasn't for a fumble, they'd have went to back-to-back Super Bowls. And then the next year they went 10-0 before he got hurt, and then Kaepernick took him the rest of the way. Like I like guys like that.
I don't know how you can't be a fan of Alex Smith. He was just the ultimate professional, and he appreciated everything he had.
Yeah. He's a good dude. Good dude. Does anyone know how his daughter was doing? Because she was battling a brain cancer or something at one point in time.
Oh, jeez.
Like, that guy has been through it.
No kidding. I didn't know about that.
Anyway, sorry I got off subject. That was just like.
No, you're good.
I think that's why I have so much faith in, like, the offense turning around, because everybody's trashing these receivers. And yes, it's frustrating that we lead the league in drops, which we've done every year since Andy's been there. Been one of the worst teams as far as drops go. But to hear everybody say this is the worst receiving core, but then to Keys' point, the only thing missing is Juju. Like, we won with these receivers last year, and nobody was okay. MVS has dropped 6 balls over 30 yards, which I don't know how many of those were legit catchable, like the one in the Eagles game, but nobody was complaining about MVS in the AFC Championship game when he was really the only receiver on the field with any experience outside of Kemp, who had more tackles than he did catches. You know what I'm saying? I'm just in his career. I really feel like if they think they can get it together, they will. And I'm rooting for these guys because nobody believes in them outside of Rice, who is pretty darn good.
I'm going to throw this one up here really quick because I mentioned it at the beginning, but I want to throw it up here for people to see. This was last year, most reliable pass catchers of 2022. What's the name you guys see at number 1?
Richie James.
Richie James using, man, this is hard to read. Next Gen Stats' catch rate over expected metric. Number 1 on here was Richie James. So, this could be, as I said earlier, this could be an underrated, just getting him back healthy on this offense could be an underrated addition for the offense.
Yeah, I'm disappointed that he hasn't been able to play. I was looking for big things out of that guy this season.
Daryl, Gooch is back home in the homeland.
Casey, but I got off the throne long enough to come back there, Daryl.
So yeah, that's something there. Yeah, I don't want to be. I'm not trying to be all negative with everything, and I think I've kind of talked both, pro wide receivers and Connor Embry, and kind of pulled out some other stuff too. Everyone else can decide. You can decide, to believe whatever you want, have your own opinion there. I'm just trying to give different perspectives, especially because, just today I watched Nate Taylor and Seth Kaiser talking about, Connor Embry, the wide receiver room and stuff, and also watched Jason Dunn and Coach Larry talking about, the responsibility of wide receivers, coaches and stuff. And so, I'm kind of throwing everything out there because, at first I was like, well, maybe I'm too, hard on Connor Embry. And then after watching Coach Larry, I'm like, well, maybe I'm not being hard enough on Connor Embry. I don't know. It's all kind of interesting. Nate Taylor, again, because I don't know if you guys caught the beginning, but Nate Taylor was talking about the Chiefs wide receivers start every practice with a drill with like an American Gladiator, whatever you want to call it, they use to hit, what I'm talking about? In a drill for the receivers to practice the defense closing in on them and having to make a contested catch. My big thing is it's not working. So maybe they need to find a different drill to help them get the skills that they're looking for out of that drill. One of the things Seth said, and he just had an article out, and it's free, it's unlocked for everyone, kind of breaking down some of his wide receiver issues. And I know one of them, he was talking about the Justin Watson, was it the 4th and 25 one, right? Where Mahomes threw a beautiful pass on 4th and 25, I think it was, that Justin Watson barely, missed because he allowed himself to get in position to be defended. And Seth's basic thing was you have to, as a receiver, you have to create your own space. So you can't just stand there and wait for the ball. You're a few yards past the first down marker. You got to come back a yard or two to give yourself that little bit of cushion between you and the defender. And that's kind of Seth's thing. It's like, it's kind of these small things where, that's the difference between you making a contested catch or not, or even having to make a contested catch or not. And it's kind of knowing, okay, am I getting zone or am I being played in man? And how should I adjust my route? How should I manipulate, the leverage of the cornerback on this play based on what I'm seeing? And it's like all these little things that are really adding up to what the problem is in the wide receiver room. But I just threw this one up here. Teams with 3 losses or less, which includes the Chiefs, obviously, and their offense and defensive ranks. And just to throw the Chiefs up there, 11-3 for the Chiefs. The Ravens are 7-2 offense and defense. Eagles are 3-22. That 22nd ranked defense looked a lot better against our offense, but I digress. 49ers are second and fourth, Cowboys fourth and eighth, respectively. And those are about the only teams that really matter on there. But just throwing that one out there because it's kind of interesting to look at.
We're not even a top 10 offense.
One of the things that would help with the drops, and it seems like such a remedial drill, but I have had family that have played professionally, and one of the things, even when we were younger, that we did, even when I played, I didn't play professionally, but in high school and college, is you take the football, and each quadrant of the football, you wrote a number on the nose, and your quarterback or whoever threw you different types of passes, and it taught you to look the ball into your hands because as soon as you caught it, you had to read the number on top. So you catch the ball and have to say 2, and then chuck the ball back, and it helped you look the ball into your hands to complete the catch. And you had, it sounds so simple, but it's little things like that that would almost help with the drops if you knew you had to do something after you looked the ball in, like see the number and yell it out. You know what I'm saying? Which would, it's a simple drill, but it can be done. That way, if you have to jump up and catch one, read the number because you have to look it into your hands. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I'm not a coach.
Well,
just little things that you can do.
And I haven't watched it yet, but Coach Larry, I think he said he has a YouTube video of wide receiver drills, and I'm definitely going to be Googling it at some point. That's the Google for you, Gooch, to see what all he has on there. But it's kind of like if it's not working, like you can't just say I'm doing the drill, I'm doing the drill, I'm doing the drill, I'm doing the drill. Like at some point, if it's not working, you got to find a different drill, right? But my kind of thing is if, Connor Embry is a first-year wide receiver coach. Last year we had a first-year wide receiver coach. Is that right? Or second? Are we using Andy's drills, right? Is kind of my question. Are we using a drill that might not be effective? Because if we're using the same drill that we've used every year and still had the drops, the drops, giving Gooch a hard time here, but the drops, maybe the issue is some of the drills themselves aren't working. Just a thought, because we're throwing things out there, but wanted to throw this one out here too for all the we really miss Juju guys. If you look at catch rates, last year Juju was at 77 and Rice is at 78. I believe this is percent. Travis has actually increased. We increased by 1% going from Juju to Rice. MVS has been the same guy. Watson has gotten better. Tony's taken a step back. And if you look at this last one here, I think this is a big one, and it's kind of telling. Sky Moore has taken a 14% backwards. Like it's a huge drop. Like, I don't know what we're doing. And Gooch, I think you hit the nail on the head with what Andy's looking for, in the wide receiver room and part of what the issue might be. I think they got to readjust some of that. And I think at some point, Andy has to let Brett just say, hey, I know you're looking for guys who are, higher character or whatever, who are going to be really good fits for chemistry, but we got to start finding some guys who might be, a little bit farther over and have more talent and can do this and this and this better. I don't know. None of us really know all the answers. No one out there, except for, I don't even want to say those in the Chiefs organization do, because we're week 11 and we're still seeing the same thing. And I think if you know the answer, then the only possibilities are it's going to take a really long time to fix, or you don't know how to, you know the answer, but you don't know how to fix it. And I think the second one is scary. And the first one is frustrating when all you hear is, yeah, we know what we need to do. It's an easy fix. Well, if it's an easy fix, then why aren't you fixing it? You know what I mean? Scott says, has anyone done a deep dive analysis on if QB1 is throwing as well or worse than last season? My unskilled perception is that's an issue. Gooch, I know you're going to hit this one, so I'm just going to let you completely answer this Scott's question for us here.
Oh, it's worse, buddy. It's worse. He had here's the thing. The quarterbacking is worse, and I think is because he's trying to be too cautious, but it also accentuates the drops. When he's like, now he makes, don't get me wrong, there's some throws. The MVS drop, that was in his hands. The Watson one on the sideline, that's about as perfect of a ball as you can throw. But there are about 10 other throws that he had that game where he overshot or threw too high or for the whole game. And it's been consistent with him. I don't know. Like I said, his footwork seems to be better. It's obviously something that he self-scouted during the bye, but I don't know what's wrong. I don't know if not having Kelsey has thrown his timing off. And so then he's just overthrowing or not throwing far enough or whatever. But it's definitely not like last year. Definitely worse than last year.
I thought you were going to tell us a bunch of things here, Gooch, like Patrick's hesitating because he doesn't trust the receivers.
I think that's simplifying it too much. I think the guy that you just watched on Chief Concerns, go check that out. Since Keith said he's not going to say anymore, I'll say it. Go check it out. I haven't watched it yet, but from everything I've heard, like, he's a brilliant guy, and I think he's right. Rotating 6 different guys in, you don't get that continuity and that routine. And I think when Patrick speeds up, these guys don't know to speed up. And so maybe he's not accounting for it as the quarterback. And so he's throwing where they should be. Or they really are legitimately always running the wrong routes. I mean, but either way, unfortunately, Patrick, as a 2-time Super Bowl winning MVP quarterback, if they are, it's your job to get them lined out.
We know that Reed yelled at Watson this game.
He yelled at Watson, he yelled at Patrick, and he yelled at Kelsey. All of them.
Yeah.
But for running the wrong route on that specific play.
The thing is, though, is the problem is how do you know it was the wrong route? Maybe Justin thought he was supposed to cut in there, because if we're following what all the pundits say, Watson came back because he knows the offense, his route running, and his rapport with Patrick. So
yeah, well,
there was help to the inside. He should have kept going straight.
I think the answer is both, right? Like, I think what you're both are saying is correct. I think the issue is there are so many rules and options in Andy Reid's offense that it's predicated on the wide receiver being able to recognize the coverage so that he's on the same page as Patrick, no matter who the receiver is. What's the leverage, and are you getting man or zone? Because if you're getting, and then sometimes on top of that, right? Sometimes on top of that, let's say, Justin Watson is reading the situation right, maybe. Well, Patrick's got a different view of it, and Patrick sees, okay, you have more space over here. than over there. And you might have a higher probability if I throw it over here, and like Travis has that same ability to see what Patrick is seeing, which makes it harder when Patrick's and maybe even the same for Tyreek. But Tyreek was different that, one, Patrick couldn't overthrow him. That would never happen. That MVS throw, first off, I think MVS kind of had a little bit of contact at like the 30-yard line that slowed him down just enough to where he didn't have to go full extension if that contact was there. But, regardless, I think part of it is you couldn't overthrow Tyreek. So that gave Patrick a larger, a larger area of error in his passes. They didn't have to be 100% perfect because Tyreek could create separation with his speed, but he could also correct and adjust to Patrick's throw, because he was that much faster. So when you have Skip Bayless being a jackass talking about Tyreek fair catching this pass or fair catching that pass, the reality is there's a tad bit of truth to that. But, I think it all makes sense with what both of you guys are saying. There are options within the route. You have to be able to read the defense. If you take what Eli Manning said and you have all these plays, and your wide receiver, this wide receiver only is practicing, these plays so many times because of how many plays you have, how is that wide receiver ever going to get on the same page as Patrick and really learn how to read the defense on this play running this route? And I scared Gooch off. Is that making sense, Aaron? Or like, am I far off?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Like, I think Eli Manning was onto something, and I think that's kind of the root of a multitude of these issues, right? Because even the receivers running their routes, you got to practice running those routes. But if you're doing so on so many plays, and I don't know, and again, it comes back to something that Jason Dunn kept saying is, I think he said Al Saunders kept saying every day, you have to run every route in the route tree as if it is a 9, right? You have to run every route as if it's a streak. And you do that because you explode off the line of scrimmage as if you're running that streak, because the moment you do that, you put the defense at a disadvantage because all of a sudden they're having to kind of bail a little bit so that you don't blow by them. And the moment they bail, that's when you run the rest of your route and you have that separation. So that's one of Jason's issues with the route running. I know from what he said. And it's like, why are all these small details going by the wayside? I don't think it's Connor Embry, because I don't think it's just a this year issue. You know what I mean?
Also on that play, I wonder if it would have been catchable for Watson, because it looked like it would have gone way over his head anyway.
No, on the 4th and 25?
No, I think he's talking about the one where are you talking about one like Patrick threw it more towards the sideline, or is it vice versa? Yeah,
threw it more towards the sideline, and he cut in instead of continuing straight.
I don't think he's going to get it. He overshot MVS on a couple of big deep balls on that too, where he just kind of he just chucked it. Like I think there are instances where he still has Tyreek speed in his brain, and he can outthrow these guys. Like
I could see that.
MVS runs a 4.37, but Tyreek runs 4.3. You know what I'm saying? And I know like we're talking about the differences of what half of a second. You know what I'm saying? But in a football game, that's a big difference. You know what I'm saying? Although
I think Tyreek was closer to 70 or 4.2, yeah.
Right.
At least you laugh, because I know what you're laughing at. So,
Well, I really appreciate my wife calling him Phyllis Rivers. That means I've done my job as a husband to really drive in that name.
But the reason I was late is I had to wash my best husband ever hoodie.
you make sure you use you use laundry detergent, right? And she didn't put like arsenic in it or whatever like that.
I don't know.
I make jokes about it, but did you see that one where that woman was like trying to off her husband by putting bleach in his coffee maker?
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah,
Yeah, I do remember that.
he actually put cameras in his house and it showed her pouring bleach in the laundry room, carrying a little cup to his coffee maker and pouring it in the coffee maker and then making him coffee.
That's really dumb. Doesn't everyone know? Isn't it like the saline from eye drops or whatever? There's a chemical in there. It only takes a few drops to kill you. So I mean, why would you go all the trouble for bleach? Because I'm pretty sure the eye drop trick is a lot harder for them to find.
Well, the weird thing is that like, this show's about to go left. And
I watch too many murder shows.
But the thing is like if you really want to off somebody, just ask your unassuming white neighbor. They can tell you some of the best ways to get rid of people. You know what I'm saying? Like, we here at the BAK Talk Bros do not condone physical or chemical violence against one's spouse or trying to delete them. That was simply just a conversation that I was having off the top of my head. Please don't take us serious.
There's a new PSA. Then, yeah, I thought with the eye drops it just caused diarrhea. If you want to kill somebody, you got to go for something harder. Antifreeze, you would think, but
I love it.
bleach is hardcore, man. How did he even stand drinking it?
Well, what he did was
And it smells.
the first time he drank it, he knew something was off, and so he took
Imagine that.
took some of it and had it analyzed or whatever. And so then, like, he knew he couldn't just go to the police on, look, my wife put bleach in my coffee maker because they would pull off it could be an accident, which is when he set up the cameras. Well, she kept giving him coffee. So what he was doing was like, oh, yeah, that's good. And then he'd either pour it down the sink when she walked out of the room or whatever, or he'd take it with him, like he was going to take it with him. And then he'd get rid of it. But he just kept videotaping her at home in his house. You know what I'm saying? With her doing it, they finally like arrested her on charges and stuff like that. But yeah, she's trying to offer some insurance money.
Smart man.
And it's just weird how, and I know this went way off football, and I'm sorry. I was trying to make fun of. I always make fun of Aaron, like he had not been feeling good, and I told him not to. I told him about eating Liz's cooking. You know what I'm saying? So if anybody's wondering where that came from, this is how that started. So his wife really isn't trying to off him. It's just something that it's a running joke between us. Don't.
It's funny.
I do personally know them, all of them. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, like, and unfortunately for them too, they actually like me. So I don't know what that says about them, but, they knew what they were getting into when they became my friends anyway. So there you go.
We're your local crazy white people.
So Daryl says they need to have 4 starting receivers and stop spinning or spreading the ball around. I don't think.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No. You go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't think any of us disagree with that. Like, really.
Actually, I kind of do.
Okay.
But I'm only going to say this because I really found the dual tight end with the dual shifting. I actually found that interesting, and it kept the Eagles off balance. Like, I really like that. So if you're going to do something like that with 2 wide receivers and just have them run different routes, like, I'm all for that because the Eagles didn't know how to handle that. And then Surprise,
Right.
surprise, it's another thing we got away from in the second half. You know what I'm saying? Like you're utilizing all this stuff in the first half, and we're scoring with the best in the league in the first half, but you stop doing these things that are successful. Like I really think that would help with the drops. You know what I'm saying? I mean, just because you would actually maybe get more separation, as you said, get them to explode off the line, they'd probably get more separation. And why do we keep the 4 tight ends? That was exactly what we kept the 4 tight ends for anyway, was to use them in that kind of situation and those kind of movements and stuff. Like I don't understand it. And I think doing stuff like that would only help.
Yeah. Well, now that you've explained yourself, I 100% agree with that. And that's something I pointed out in Dan's live stream, Dan Talks Football, Monday night when he was doing his live stream during the game, the first half, right? I noticed that same thing too, because it's not something that I'd remember seeing before this game, seeing Travis and Noah going into motion at the same time. Most of the time they returned, right? So it's like, I'm sure there was a strategic reason to kind of force Philly to using both guys, right? To where you can't really hide whether you're in man or zone. But yeah, I noticed that too, and I also noticed from that that we got away from it in the second half. I just haven't. I mentioned it at the beginning of the stream. I just haven't went back to watch all 22 that I can confirm that 100%. But to me, that's what I remembered because it kind of stuck out. It's like, wait, where did it go? By the way, we were running the ball excellently in the first half, and you can do that a lot better when you're in 12 personnel. And what else can you do then? You can do great play action from it. So it's like it was interesting. And is this Gooch where you might say we didn't want to keep running it in the second half because if we see the Eagles in the Super Bowl, it's something we want to build off of. I don't know. You can throw
No,
that stuff out there.
I wouldn't even say that, because the one thing you want to do as you start to make the playoff push is to get things that you do well. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so you show them that in the Eagles game, you do it the whole game, even do it the next game, because then people will start looking for that, and then you can run other stuff off of it or take one of them out and go back to your base offense and do different stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, at this point, I don't see, especially at 7, even at 8-2, you know what I'm saying? It's time to start perfecting the things you're going to do leading into the playoffs. And I actually thought it was brilliant because there was a lot of times, you're right, they went back, returned to where they were, but there were times that they split up. One went to one side of the formation and one went to the other. And those are things like you've got to account for, because Noah Gray is an above average pass catcher. So you have to account for him. You definitely have to account for Kelsey. You know what I'm saying? Now you've got one-on-ones. Give it the ball to Rasheed short. Have Noah run a curl, have Travis run a medium post and hit Rasheed with the screen and let him get downfield. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, we were running great out of that formation. 120 something yards rushing in the first half. And like all of this stuff that's positive, we fell back from in the second half. So I'm stunned, because that, again, yes, you only have 2 wide receivers out there, but you know what they get? They get reps, they get comfortable. Maybe drops don't happen as much because there's not as much pressure on, oh, I got to catch this one. I think a lot of these drops are mental. You know what I'm saying? I think while inexcusable from MVS, like it's the one catch for him that was probably catchable all day, and it was on his head. He was thinking about it. I got to bring this in. I got to bring this in. I got to bring this in. And then you end up, because you're thinking too much in a game where it really works best when you're not and everything's just kind of on autopilot, that you drop it. You know what I'm saying? Again, never played in the NFL, but a lot of us have played sports, and it's better when you don't think, when you're just out there.
And I think that those kinds of catches are the hardest ones, right? They're over your head. You have to look, like it's like the Willie Mays, catch that he was famous for making, or later day for more modern people, Jim Edmonds, in baseball, would make those over the shoulder catches. I think that's the hardest one for a receiver. Whereas running back to the ball or running to the side is a lot easier than having to be running straight, right? You got to keep your balance. You're looking out, but you still have to watch the ball come into your hands from over your head where you can't even really see it. And so I'm not making excuses for MVS there, but I do think it was hard. It's one of the hardest catches you have to make. You add in the mental aspect to it. You add in, that it was raining outside. And I did see in a replay that it looked like there was some contact at like the 30. So you have to kind of regain your momentum when you're going that fast, when there's even the smallest bit, of contact, right? I think people try to dismiss contact, like small contact, like it's nothing, but think about NASCAR. The smartest touch on a NASCAR going 190, 200 miles an hour can be the difference between going in the wall or wrecking or whatever, and so at 22 miles an hour as a human being, it can make a difference there. We kind of,
before you move on, for as great as Willie Mays' catch was, Jim Edmonds was better because he had to dive and he was diving towards the wall. If you haven't seen that catch, YouTube it. It's amazing. And he had a head first dive towards the wall where he could have seriously broke his neck, and he caught it on a dive without looking like it was an amazing catch. Sorry, I just remember.
Do you remember that?
Like well, when you said it, it played in my head, and I was like, that was an amazing catch. It really was.
They both.
I'm gonna have to go ahead and run though, fellas.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to here soon. Aaron, take care. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah. I assume I'm going to talk to both of y'all tomorrow anyway, so I'm not saying it till midnight.
Yeah, I'm going to have to leave here soon, but I did want to say, Gooch, they both made those catches regularly, but I think the difference was Jim Edmonds always felt like he purposely put himself in position to have to make those catches. Like he would slow play it. Maybe he was just that bad at reading the ball. I don't think he was based off of his reactions, but it always seemed like he kind of slow played making the catch so that he could dive, right? And I think that was the difference between him and Willie is like Willie was actually running like full range, because I don't want to say because he had to. It's not that he was slower than Jim Edmonds. I just think Jim Edmonds kind of purposely put himself going after the ball slower to make those. But anyway.
Now, since you said that, I was thinking as you're saying that he did make a lot of those catches during his career.
I think it was
like a lot more than most because it was almost like every game he had one of those, which now makes me rethink everything I've seen on like, oh, what if he really was setting it up so he can make highlight plays and get more money and stuff like that? I mean, if he did, it's brilliant. The wear and tear on your body's got to be rough, though. But that's a whole nother avenue to think about. That's crazy.
I don't want to start any conspiracy theories, but anyway, before we have to go here, we've only talked about the recap of the game and hit the chat stuff and kind of
really weak, baby.
Kind of hit the negative stuff here, but what about Kadarius Toney's return? So shout out to him. Right. It was, or no, McCole Hart. Yeah. Kadarius Toney's returns, I think. Right. And then Gooch, what did you think about the play where we ended up with both Kadarius Toney? I think it was Pacheco started as the halfback. Then Pacheco motioned to fullback, and Toney came as the halfback, and Pacheco ended up being the lead blocker for Toney, who got a handoff and got like 7 yards.
Yeah, I like seeing Toney with the ball in space. It was amazing. Wait, do the Chiefs play this Friday? Is the Raiders game this Friday?
It is Raiders week. Let's see. I think it's Sunday though, isn't it? And kids are getting crazy. Yeah, Sunday, 3:25 p.m.
Okay.
So, really quickly, Gooch, keys to the Chiefs beating the Raiders.
Honestly, we need points in the second half. We need to keep the offense on the field more, and we need to stop. We need to score in the second half. That's number one. Number two, we need to get away from throwing as much as we're throwing it. This team isn't like that right now, where we can be 70% pass, 30% run. I say this because the one thing I was really impressed with, and for the first time in the Andy Reid era, I think I've ever seen it, is it was 4th and 1, and they actually handed the ball off to Pacheco. There was no tight end under center. There was no fullback dive. It was Patrick under center, hand the ball off right into the line. I think we still need to run Pacheco, take what the defense gives us, and try to play a complete game offensively to take some of the pressure off that number 3 ranked defense. And block Max Crosby.
Yeah, I think that I think you have to be able to stop Josh Jacobs in this game. I think that's, to me, I think that's the biggest thing our defense has to key on. We played the Eagles, great wide receivers. We played other teams that had great wide receivers as well. And Devontae Adams is Devontae Adams, but I think there's a point where you feel comfortable with that secondary going up against Devontae Adams. So it kind of becomes, who's the next receiver for the Raiders? Or are they just going to run Josh Jacobs 25, 30 times? And is our defense going to be able to stop it?
That's a really good question. And don't forget is it Antonio Pierce? The head coach? Don't forget that factor, because you remember how the Raiders, for some reason, start playing better when they get interim coaches, like Versace. You know what I'm saying? Like it's almost like they perform better in turmoil than they do with just normal day-to-day stuff. And I'm actually comfortable with Devontae and that secondary, because if you think about it, we kept Tyreek under 100, we kept AJ Brown under 25. I mean, we're facing, and you can actually put Snead on Devontae and then put McDuffie on Hunter Renfro. And I think you can lock that down. Then you're just asking the defense to stop the run. I saw that. Is Bolton back? Like, I saw he was active for the game, but for some reason I don't remember seeing him, or at least hearing his name called.
Let me look that one up. I'm not sure on that one. It's kind of getting crazy in here. Yeah, give me a second to look that up. But Gooch, are you expecting? So I mentioned, I don't remember if you were in here for this, but while I looked this up, but I had mentioned, back when it was last year, right? With kind of Juan Thornhill when he was coming back from the injury, and Spags kept playing Sorensen. And
yeah.
What's that?
I'm just remembering that year. Go ahead.
Yeah, like he kept playing Sorensen and kept playing Sorensen and kept playing Sorensen. And, we thought, okay, well, Spags is going to try to make it to the bye, and then make his adjustments and changes. But the media and the fans didn't let it get to the bye because the media started asking like week 4 or 5, and Andy was getting frustrated. Spags was getting frustrated. Like players on the defense were getting frustrated at being asked every week, about that, to the point where Spags kind of had to go in a couple weeks before the bye and start playing Thornhill and put Sorensen on the bench more. Do you kind of see kind of this kind of frustrating thing? Of course, the big difference is we're now after the bye, but do you kind of see something where we see that somehow click with the offense this week for the Raiders game, or do you still think that the issues themselves are going to take like another month, or maybe we won't even see anything come about until until next season?
What I'm worried about is I think it'll be fixed. Do I know when? No. I'd like it to start with the Raiders game. That would be amazing. The problem is with the defense. I think you've got two different entities. Like, okay, yeah, defense or the media wouldn't let it sit, so he started playing. And the problem is now does Mahomes start pressing? Because now he's getting visibly frustrated too, and you can see it after throws. You know what I'm saying? When the camera pans to him, and then does he start pressing, and does the offense look worse? Because now he wants to be successful so bad, he's trying to do things that are out of context or out of character for him. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm worried about now. But hopefully, like, I still believe they'll get it fixed. I think for as heralded as Andy is, I think, and for as much success that we've seen, even with this group from last year, I think sometimes we as fans forget that it's a lot of work. And sometimes to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs. That's the analogy, right? So maybe fingers crossed, the Eagles game is making Andy mad enough that he's delving more into working and film study and stuff like that to try and figure stuff out. Maybe he's settled in his rotation. Maybe he's going to bring Richie James back in. I mean, he did say that he was trying to be easy with Kadarius, and Kadarius got season high in snaps last game. So we'll see. I hope they figure it out. I do. I don't want to wait till next year, because then all you'll have is the naysayer saying you wasted a year of Mahomes' prime. Which, unfortunately, guys, thanks to Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, his prime could last until he's 36, 37.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't either.
I don't know what to expect anymore, because I've tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. We kept saying, bye week, let's look, see what happens. How many defenses have we played now where they have not had good pass defense and our offense has still struggled? And it's like at some point we might have to acknowledge that Andy and Pat and Travis don't have the answers this year.
The problem is that they're good enough in the first half. So the question really becomes, what the hell are they doing in the second half? You know what I'm saying? Like, what, it's not even what are they doing? What changed? You know what I'm saying? From the first half, unless it's, we don't know what we're going to call once we're off the scripted 2025. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the biggest question. What is going on at halftime? Even if look, if the first half, and I am oversimplifying this because I know that's not the case. Don't nobody jump in the comments and tell me I'm wrong. I already know. If the first 25 worked in the first half, rearrange the first 25 and do it again. I grew up when I played football. I'm sure you did too. Like our coach, we're gonna run the same thing till you stop it. And then when you stop it, we'll do something else, and we'll run that till you stop it. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it's working, run it again. Make them show that they can stop it and defeat you. And then everything else that you want to do, stick a play in here or there, great, to throw them off balance. But you got to do something. You know, like we're winning first halves and losing second halves and now losing games. So you got to figure it out, I guess.
And the last thing I'll say, because I think we've harped on this enough, is to be fair, right? Offense around the NFL is down. Like defenses are making great adjustments. That includes great halftime adjustments, right? And so,
which we would normally never tell, we would never give that to Spags. Remember last year?
right. So I mean, you have to kind of look at it fairly. But and again, like we said at the beginning, or we've said numerous times already now, we had 3 touchdowns that were there. 2 of them, we were in the red zone twice where we should have scored a touchdown, the interception, and then the Travis fumble that took away 14 points right there. If you want to count the MVS pass on there, that's 21 points right there. If the Chiefs scored that extra 21 points, it is a 38-21 game. And we're having a much different conversation about this offense. So it kind of goes back to, again, it's kind of a catch-22 because we've had these issues the last few years, but we don't have that interception a lot of those games. We don't have that ball punched out, or, we end up having that game-winning touchdown drive, and then everyone's like, we're not going to complain about a win, and we're just going to ignore these issues, even though we see them game after game, quarter after quarter, drive after drive, 4-game stretch after 4-game stretch over the last 3, 4, or 5 years. So it's kind of like, we're 1 or 2 plays away from whether we're happy and we're not talking about things or not. And so that still has to be factored into all the kind of frustration that we have. But yeah, I don't know. I think I said before the Eagles game that even coming out of the bye, that I wouldn't be able to really judge the adjustments if we lost the game, because I saw it as being a toss-up. And so I think it's still going to take another game or 2, but I was still kind of unimpressed without seeing some of the changes we at least expected. Not the results, that's one thing, but not seeing some of the changes that we were expecting or hoping for. So,
Speaking of which, looks like Dan Talks Football's in the chat. Everybody go check out Dan. Dan Talks Football. It is Dan and Keys. Most Tuesday nights, Keys is on there holding down the bros on another show. And Dan is super, super knowledgeable when it comes to football and sports gambling. So check him out. He does a pick show where he gives you the over-under and all that good stuff and picks his winners. And if you want to learn about sports gambling, he has shows for that too. Really bright guy and one friend of the show, friend of ours, good dude. So check him out. And if you're wondering about the meth song that he has in his head, I had to YouTube it last night for the first time because I'd never heard it. It's pretty catchy. Go check it out.
Yeah, that's old school 90s for you. Really quick here before we go, and then Gooch, after we answer this, if you want to add anything else on here. And again, as Gooch said, I think we have Dan in our description as one of our guides. There's a few channels on there. We hope you guys support. But Chris with Kansas City Area Youth asked, what's up with the offensive line holding Chiefs defensive line and receivers getting mugged during routes? Kels was actually mugged during the punch out. Hashtag officiating bad.
Oh, okay.
So what do you think, Gooch? Why isn't our defensive line getting the holding calls when they're being held? Why aren't we getting more illegal contact and defensive holding and stuff for our receivers. What do you think?
I think referees, just like fans, have expectations. I think when your defense is really good, you don't get a lot of the calls in your favor because you are that good. And so they expect you to kind of be able to play through it because you've done it all year. Otherwise, your defense wouldn't be that good. So they tend to swell their whistles more. Um, and offense, well, I mean, it's the Chiefs. You know, I, I'm not one of those conspiracy theories that say that the league doesn't want the Chiefs to win or anything like that because holding happens on every play everywhere. But one of the things that most teams have gotten smart with is that they wear the same color gloves as the team they're playing. So you can kind of get away with the hold until you slow it down. And keep in mind, the refs are human. Like they can only call what they really see. And if they called every single thing, then there'd be a bunch of us complaining that the refs are interfering and affecting the game.
Now, my counter to that would be they didn't have a problem doing that with Juwan Taylor 40 times a game and, weeks 2 through 4 or whatever it was. So,
Well, and I think with that, the reason with that is because thanks to Troy Aikman or whoever it was in week 1,
Mike Tirico, I believe.
The league decided they wanted to make an example out of Taylor, and so they called everything on him. You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't until Patrick and Andy finally stepped up that those false start calls kind of slowed down again.
Right.
But
we did see a few of them in this Eagles game, and that was one of the things that did piss me off. It's like, if you're going to call that, you literally have Lane Johnson who is doing the same thing. And I think I saw about half a dozen times with my naked eye where there were clear false starts that didn't get called on the Eagles that were getting called on Juwan Taylor. But, I mean, Dan gave Gooch gave his answer. I was looking at Dan's name in the chat. Gooch gave his answer, but, I think the thing is if the refs started calling things more fairly with the Chiefs defense already as good as it is, it would be so nasty that, I don't think the ratings would be good enough for these games because, and I understand what Gooch is saying. Yeah, you can't call a guy, but, again, they did exactly that against Juwan Taylor, to where, Chris Jones shouldn't be held nearly every play the way that offenses get away with it. But if he wasn't, think about this. Even with the holding, right? Even if we want to say Chris Jones was, by the letter of the law, blatantly held every single play of the game, the Eagles, by most accounts, have the best offensive line in the NFL, and we got 5 sacks on them. And if the refs start calling that fairly, think about what happens in this game, right? Think about how many sacks the Chiefs end up with in this game, and think about how screwed the Eagles are in this game. And instead of this game had the highest rating of a Monday Night Football game I believe I saw in 3 decades, 30 years. If they call that and the Eagles are basically screwed, this game isn't getting those ratings because this game is over at halftime. And so I understand Gooch doesn't want to be a conspiracy theorist, and I respect that. And I'm not necessarily one either, but at the same time, I think you can clearly see that in whatever game it is, when it's a game that's expected to have high ratings, there are quite timely penalties that seem to kind of go together with when ratings start to dip, maybe. But that's kind of my thing. If you call Chris Jones getting held, it makes the Chiefs defense that much scarier, and it really screws the opposing offenses up. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. So And if Dan's in the chat, I know Dan can give his answer because Dan is like the antithesis of most of the Chiefs' kingdom. So if Gooch isn't a conspiracy theorist, Dan really isn't a conspiracy theorist. But anyway, that was my answer to it. I think the NFL tries to instill a little bit more fairness when one team is kind of more dominant to the other. And you could maybe point to Detroit's defensive line in week 1 against our offensive line, and say kind of the same thing, but, for Detroit, didn't get the benefit and our offense did in week 1. Yeah, nobody in the national media I've seen is talking about or pointing out how Chris Jones is getting held. So, but anyway, I know I got to go. I'm sure Gooch has got to go. Gooch has had a bad day, or a rough day rather, but we want to thank you guys for tuning in this Wednesday night. We kind of went a little later than we necessarily wanted to, but want to thank you guys and wish you a happy Thanksgiving. And Gooch, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Man, it was super sweet to be here with you guys again tonight. Even though I did have a rough day, it's really kind of brightened it a little bit. Keys and me are both, Keys is off on this week. We might have something else for you, maybe another live after Thanksgiving, Friday or Saturday or something, depending on what they've got planned. We appreciate y'all checking us out, whether religiously impacts, and check out again Dan Talks Football. It's a good dude. He's got a lot of good stuff on his channel. Keys is on there a lot. Dan talks to other teams, fans, and stuff like that. Really good dude. We enjoyed everything he's got going on over there. Happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your family while you're with them. Tell them you love them. Find somebody else and tell them you love them too. I don't care if it's your church member, a distant cousin, say hi to somebody, wave, wish somebody a happy Thanksgiving. Do something extra for those that maybe don't get time to spend with their loved ones or have lost some this year. I am really a big believer in being thankful at this time of year. For me, for somebody who doesn't do friends, I'm thankful for the few that I have, including the guys on this pod. Has made this year really enjoyable for me, even with all the stuff that I have gone through. So be thankful. Tell somebody you love them. We'll catch you soon. We'll be back. Go ahead and hit that theme music.
You got your team, and we got a kingdom. Ready for war, we score at will. We're the Super Bowl champs, the king of the hill.